Chapter 155. Gotham City. Nighttime. Crackle. A flash of lightning streaked through the cloudy skies of the city alongside the sound of crackling thunder. Rain splattered through the opening of the Batmobile's doors as the caped crusader stepped out of his special ride. Cold winds swept over him, swinging Bruce's cape to the sides. Looking up was the sight of dark rain clouds gathering overhead. No citizen of Gotham would be surprised. The storm would be slow to wash over the city, but by the end of night, there would be no dry area for miles. "Are you sure about this?" A clear, hesitant voice came from the other end of the comms. "There's nothing to hesitate about," answered the Dark Knight, his tone firm and his voice deep. Despite that, his narrowing eyes made it seem like he was about to face a great enemy. Truth be told, he was. "I'm already here." Crackle. A flash of blue light emerged from the clouds, lighting up the area before him. The black gates rattled with the wind as Bruce stood before his destination. A place that could be considered the root of Gotham's darkness itself. The lair of monsters. Arkham Asylum. This madhouse was a place the caped crusader was all too familiar with. Walking through the dark hallways, he had honestly lost count of how many times he had set foot in here over the years. How many psychopaths he had locked up here. Again. And again, and again. At this point, the layout of the building was burned into his mind. Every turn, hall, prison cell, crevice. Rain water dripped down his waterproof cape as he passed through the doors one after another. Bruce knew the cells and the prisoners they held. If that wasn't enough, he could recite them without blinking. In this building, Batman was as much a regular as any other prisoner. So much so that his visits were already protocol. The guards always stepped aside, nodding when he approached and unlocking anywhere he needed passage to. Clink. The first sound made its way to his ears as he passed the first cell. The sound of metal, a flipping coin. Not long after his shadow departed, lightning struck once again, illuminating the cell for a split second and revealing its resident. Two-Face. Approaching the next one, the first thing that assaulted him was the freezing cold. Icy air could be seen being emitted from under the cell door. He didn't stop at that one either. The third. A growl. Animal growl. Recently imprisoned Killer Croc. Moving on. Ha 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 ha. Light emerged again, illuminating the room. Bruce clearly saw the shadow of the mad clown appearing on the walls through the guarded opening. That laughter. His footsteps paused slightly. But that lasted only but a moment as he resumed his steps. Because today, he wasn't here for the Joker. Or at least, he wasn't here for that Joker anyway. Arkham Asylum was a place for the criminally insane, and all its patients were either insane or murderous criminals pretending to be insane. A group of hardened individuals with so much blood on their hands that 10 lifetimes of punishment wouldn't be enough to serve as proper atonement. However, a new tragedy had occurred that scared even these freaks. Nothing else but the appearance of a second Joker. Creak. The sound of a heavy metal door creaking opening resounded through the corridor. The door opened, and at the entrance stood the caped crusader himself. "How is he?" Bruce asked in a deep, unrecognizable voice while looking straight ahead. "He's..." The guard who opened the door for him opened his mouth but hesitated to speak. "He's what?" Bruce shot him a look. "Strange." Batman didn't reply at first. "How strange?" "He's acting normal." "You're saying that he's acting like usual?" "No." The guard shook his head. "He isn't behaving like he usually does. He's behaving like someone else." His eyes drifted into the cell as he spoke. A trace of fear flashing through his eyes. Within was a room, and within this room was another cell. Iron bars all around like an animal cage, only much larger. And in this cage sat a man with a book in hand. Bruce had his eyes narrow. The Joker was known for his unusual antics. And if that were all, then he wouldn't mind. No. What made him narrow his eyes wasn't the fact that he was reading but the book itself. The Bible. You heard that right. At the moment, Jack Oswald White was sitting cozily on an iron chair with glasses on his face and the book of the Bible in hand. If that wasn't enough to startle someone, Bruce didn't know what was. He's been requesting for books ever since he got here. He calmly asks for meals, he no longer plays cards, there's been fewer outbursts, and he no longer laughs. Each sentence made its way into his ears, causing Bruce's frown to deepen ever so slightly. I was lucky enough not to be on shift for the last breakout before his death. And seeing his changes. Well, I'd rather believe the other one down the hall is the real Joker and this one some kind of imposter. He's acting normal, so normal that it's strange. Bruce didn't respond. His gaze fixed on that clown sitting there, seemingly engrossed in a book without bothering to acknowledge his presence. The smile. It was gone. It didn't matter whether the Joker reacted to his visits, but that creepy smile that seemed to be forever etched on his face would never disappear the moment he showed up. It did today, though. The Joker wasn't smiling anymore. If this wasn't enough to startle someone, Bruce didn't know what was. Look. This is probably above my pay grade and I shouldn't be the one to tell you how to do your job. The guard uttered hesitantly. But be careful. There's something terribly off with this one. A second Joker is bad enough, but this calm one seems much harder to get along with. Honestly, the guard didn't even know how that was possible. Well, I won't know until I find out, now will I? Those were his last words before he stepped into the room. Creak. The sound of the door closing behind him fell into his ears as he walked forward. His soft footsteps signaled his entrance. The Joker didn't respond. Not even when he was practically standing before the cage. Seeing this, Bruce narrowed his eyebrows even more. His expression solemn as he stared at the clown without uttering a word. Silence. A strange scene continued in which Batman watched the Joker with an intense glare, yet the other party didn't reciprocate. His eyes glued on the book as if he were reading some heavenly treasure. Time elapsed as neither party uttered a word to each other. Until. Thud. It was the sound of a book being closed. Well, Batsy. The familiar raspy voice drifted into his ears once again. Looks like that hasn't changed. How nice of you to pay me a visit. Green hair, pale face, blood-red lips. And that grinning smile. You done ignoring me? Ignore you? That doesn't sound right. I thought we were playing a game of who could stay quiet the other the longest. And you didn't keep playing. Consider it my consideration. The green-haired madman gestured. After all, a member of the Justice League must have a busy schedule. You definitely won't come to see me to check up on how I'm doing. It's heartbreaking, really. With my death, I honestly thought you would go to great lengths to avenge me. Or at least put my murderer behind bars. TSK. I truly thought we had a thing going on. He's the same. Yep. There was no denying it. The Dark Knight's expression remained unchanged, but his mind contained numerous thoughts. Yet, different at the same time. What's with the books? The caped crusader turned his gaze to the cell floors. There were 2 rows of shortly stacked books beside him. His eyes moved from the floor back to the book in hand. Or are you going to tell me that you're actually seeking redemption after your resurrection from death? He asked apathetically. To which, those blood-red lips parted to form a sinister smile. What can I say, Batsy? A change of scenery can truly broaden your horizons. His speech patterns. Batman pondered on the Joker's choice of words. From that, I'd assume that hell did a number on you. Perhaps, perhaps not. But that's not why you're here, is it? Batman's stoic expression almost cracked from surprise. The Joker was never like this. Never so straight to the point. That small change, despite being so minute, was accurately captured. After their long-lasting twisted relationship, how could he not know what Batman was thinking? Come on, Batsy, let's get this over with. I'm really not in the mood for a back and forth right now. For a moment, Batman was momentarily silenced. Why did Amari bring you back? Oh. A tricky one right off the bat. Bruce clenched his fists. Talk. Sorry. No can do. Living up to expectations, the Joker shook his head frantically. You should know me by now, Batsy. There's a certain rhythm to these things. I cause trouble, you show up, we have some laughs and the whole thing starts all over again. Nothing you do can make this work the other way around. Batman gritted his teeth in fury. The continuous tensing of his fist showing that he was desperately restraining himself from taking drastic measures. Seeing his state, the grin on his face only grew wider. Unless, of course, you take that option. They both knew what he was talking about. So what's it gonna be? You gonna do it this time? Or just put me in another body cast for 6 months? Bang! A loud bang resounded through the cell. Joker watched unflinchingly as Batman's fist slammed against the iron bar. Staring into the eyes of the caped crusader, he could see it. That look, that glare, the one bordering or plain murder. Almost there. He leaned forward with a bit of expectation welling up in his heart. But while he lived up to Batman's expectations, Batman always failed to live up to his. The murderous glare cooled down as he withdrew his fist from the bar. TSK. Disappointing really. It was always like this. So close and yet so far. But don't worry. The mad clown uttered while leaning back in his seat. If there's one thing you can count on, it's that whenever I stir up trouble, I'll always make sure you know it was me. So my advice. Just take a break, Batsy, and wait for the fun to happen. Ha ha ha. The maniacal laughter once again reappeared. For strange reasons, however, the guard outside felt relieved. Sure enough, once anything was wrong with Joker, all you had to do was all the Batman. Creak. The door reopened as Batman took his leave. The Joker watched all this with a smile on his face as the door closed. Seriously, always in such a rush. The man-clown uttered before picking the next book for a good read. The title of the book was particularly eye-catching. How to Find the Entrance to Hell. Thunderclap. The heavy downpour of rain water was accompanied by the constant sound of thunderclaps. The gates were opened and Bruce stepped out of Arkham Asylum, his mood fallen to the lowest of lows. Did you gain anything useful? Oracle's voice came through from the intercom. Very little. Bruce replied plainly as he arrived before the Batmobile. But yes. Great. At least it wasn't a total waste of. The voice on the other end suddenly cut off. Bruce stopped in his tracks. Oracle. He called out. There was no response. Oracle. It happened then. A blinding white light suddenly erupted from the distance, causing Bruce to squint his eyes. Raising his hand to block the light, he turned his gaze in that direction, only to see a large explosion rushing in his direction. What the? Before Batman could react, the bright explosion rushed in his direction, engulfing everything it touched, with Batman alongside it. In a split second, the Dark Knight was blown apart completely, him and everything around him for miles disintegrating into ashes. He wasn't the only one. As an explosion erupted from Strader Pharmaceuticals, expanding rapidly and destroying everything in its path like a nuclear bomb. It spread from the city all the way to the very outskirts of Gotham, engulfing anything and destroying everything in its path. Outer space. Watchtower. Damn you, Bruce. A well-timed curse echoed through the monitor room. Emerging from the hallway leading to the kitchen, Oliver Queen stepped outside with a sullen face. It couldn't be helped. With the reassignment of Black Canary, Green Arrow was once again brought back to perform guard duty on the Watchtower. Assigned to watch-keeping duty yet again. God so help me. Arriving at the Watchtower computer, the green-costumed hero muttered angrily while taking a sip of his beverage. That's one good cup of joe. A moment of silence later, the Archer muttered begrudgingly as he began his job of monitoring the world while desperately combating the urge to swipe YouTube videos instead. He still remembered Batman's frightening expression the last time he was caught. All right then. He sighed as he swiped to display the world map as he took another sip. Let's see what the world is up to today. This was his line of thought in the first moment. The next, however. PFTTT. The Archer's eyes went wide as he spit out the coffee in his mouth. Thankfully, it wasn't on the billion-dollar supercomputer. Batman would probably have his head for that. Nevertheless, Bruce definitely wasn't going to like this either. He thought so as he hurriedly turned on the communication channel. This is Green Arrow to all Leaguers. Please respond. Gotham City is gone, I repeat, Gotham is gone. Chapter 156. Meanwhile. Metropolis. Taru. Thud. The last thug fell to the floor and lay there unmoving. Hey Viking. He's not dead? No. The new god shook his head in denial. Only unconscious. Thank goodness. The pink-clothed Seraphan uttered in relief as she stood from her squatting posture. All right now. What's next? Next. Moonrider raised an eyebrow and dropped the two unconscious bodies he was carrying on the ground. That should be all of them. Correct. The technology of New Genesis has been secured. Part of our mission is done. These group of teenagers. Or rather, Teenage lookalikes were the forever people. Young gods of New Genesis. But while they might look like teenagers, the youngest among them was already 12,000 years old. And they had just finished tracking down the last of the stolen New Genesis weapons to a construction site in Metropolis, smuggled to Earth some time ago. As for the smugglers, Viken only remembered them calling themselves Intergang. The battle. It took even less time to finish than for the Motherbox to track the New Genesis weapons. And the other part? We currently have no way to find him or even determine when he appears in this world. Seraphin asked with lit eyes. That does prove difficult. However, the heroes of this world have already given us their word to aid us in finding him once they return from their mission. Everyone had their eyebrows furrow. Not due to Viken's words, but a discovery they had come across during their tune here. Breaches to other universes. Lots of them. How was Superman and the team able to cross the breach to Earth-1 after spending so much time without success? That credit fell entirely on the Forever people. The Motherbox within their possession had proved capable of stabilizing the dimensional portal, granting safe passage between worlds. Superman immediately organized a rescue party to go to the negative universe while Batman had discussed with them, asking for their help in closing the breaches plaguing their universe. In exchange for help in contacting Amari, the two sides hit it off. How did this world create so many openings to other dimensions? Seraphin couldn't help but ask. No clue. But that aside, as it is not our primary. Huh. Viken's deep voice came to a halt as, at that moment, his Motherbox let out frantic beeps. Motherbox? What's the matter? In response to his question was more noise and blinking lights. What is she? Seraphin had never seen the Motherbox react like this before. If she didn't know any better, she would have thought it was going haywire. Of course, that remote possibility was wiped out as Viken's face grew more serious with each passing second. That can't be. Wait. What? The Motherbox just detected a huge energy signature many miles west of here. The dark-skinned new god explained as he rushed past them towards their flying air carrier. Hey, what about the weapons? Leave them for now. This is more important. Viroom. The air carrier made a revving noise like a sports car before taking into the sky. Viken. I believe we all share the same confusion. What exactly is happening? What's happening is that. He pointed forward, drawing everyone's attention. When they looked over, their eyes couldn't help but widen. A bright, white light reaching towards the heavens could be seen far off in the distance, expanding rapidly in all directions. New gods had far superior senses to regular humans. The moment they laid eyes on it, all 5 young gods felt the hairs on the skin stand on end. Under their astonished gazes, the bright light continuously moved, engulfing anything that stood in its path without restraint. This feeling. Gotham City was more than 80 miles away. For the citizens of Metropolis who hadn't stepped into their homes yet, the light display was far too visible as soon as it caught their eye. Hey! What's that? What? Are you blind? Look up. Great. Now what? I don't like the look of this. The citizens below immediately broke into clamors. While above. Viken. What is this? I don't know. Viken uttered solemnly while looking at the Motherbox. But the energy signatures she's recording are off the charts. This can't be one of those bombs the humans possess going off, right? That. Before Dreamer could even consider the possibility. No. It's not. Viken shut her down instantly. His face looking particularly unsightly. Unless humans have found an energy source capable of equaling a dwarf star. What? Simultaneous exclamations emerged from all of them. Tell me you're joking. Seraphin uttered. The lack of a reply was an answer on its own. Dreamer's expression changed drastically. That's impossible. We're new gods, and even we can't create stars. True, but the energy signature is awfully similar to one. But that would mean. How much energy does the sun possess? According to scientists. 44 quadrillion watts. A large electric power plant produces about 1 billion. A Tsar bomb released 210 megatons of TNT equivalent energy. The full power of the sun was equal to 100 billion Tsar bombs. What would it mean if such power was released on the surface of the Earth? 2 words. Global extinction. This world is doomed. Moonrider, the usually silent one, uttered with an open mouth. Just the energy released from such an explosion would be enough to wash over the Earth several dozen times. That kind of heat energy meant instant vaporization. Anything and everything on the surface that wasn't Superman would be turned to dust upon contact. And that was just the best-case scenario. The atmospheric conditions would be destroyed, making the Earth uninhabitable. The blast would alter Earth's rotation, the shockwave would shatter the Earth, and even if it didn't, the geographical upheaval would be enough to trigger massive earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions. Moonrider was right. Earth wasn't capable of surviving this. Then what do we do? Dreamer uttered in a panicked tone. Isn't it obvious? Leave before that thing gets to us. The red-haired Taborkadon uttered. That. Dreamer was stunned. But what about the Earthlings? There must be something we can do. We can't save them, Dreamer. Serifan, the most lively of them all, uttered in a low tone. Dreamer opened her mouth, wanting to refute, but Viking beat her to it. From the looks of it, we won't have to. Their leader stared into the distance with narrowed eyes. What? Huh? His words immediately spread confusion among them. What did he mean? Viking. What are you? Look. He didn't wait for her to finish. Just pointed and spoke. Everyone's attention regathered at the light beam that was slowly expanding. The blast wave had already enveloped all of Gotham and was spreading, engulfing miles with each passing second. At first, they didn't understand. But as the seconds elapsed, they did. With each passing moment, the spread of the blast wave grew increasingly slower. All until it just stopped in place for a split second. The next, however, the massive wave of energy began to retreat frantically. Under their astonished gazes, the land engulfed by the blazing light was released back as everything receded towards the point it initially started from. It's going back. Not going back. It's fading. Viking watched the decreasing energy levels, his mind full of question marks. Something's taking it away. For countries with military satellites all over the world, NASA, and the Watchtower, the same played out on their screens. And so, what was once a mighty blast wave that would destroy the Earth shrunk rapidly. Barely a few seconds after it spread, the explosion disappeared completely. And at its epicenter, large waves of energy surged into Amari's body as he stood floating in the air. Silence. Feeling the energy flowing into him, Amari couldn't help but furrow his eyebrows at the thought of what just happened. I'm not wrong. He literally just. Without completing his thoughts, his gaze was drawn downwards as he took a look at the earth below him. Only. What greeted his eyes wasn't the floor but a large, deep hole on the earth spreading for nearly 50+ miles. It was deep, dark, and if anyone were looking at it from outer space, they would clearly see a large black spot on the spherical ball that was planet Earth. The attack had arrived in a split second, but if Amari wasn't wrong, then Lucifer had just thrown a full-blown sun at his face. Truth be told, this was the first time he was absorbing the full energy of a single sun. The blast power released was so damaging that it had created a hole in the earth and annihilated everything it touched during the automatic absorption process. Amari took a good look at his surroundings. Gotham City could no longer be described as in a banged-up state with wrecked buildings. No, there wasn't a single structure left in existence anymore. The home of the Caped Crusader was gone, and in its place was a large hole in the earth of unprecedented size. Apart from the time he destroyed Apocalypse while fighting Darkseid, this is the second most destructive instance he had ever encountered when faced against an enemy. And this was just the minimum damage. If not for the fact that he had been absorbing all that wanton power upon its release, the damage done would be far greater as the earth would have been wiped out similar to the way Apocalypse was. I see that had little effect. A voice called out, drawing his attention. A distance away stood the man who caused this. The devil himself, still in that stylish tuxedo, exuding that gentlemanly British accent while looking at him with a smile and a look of interest. Truth be told, he was interested. Quite interested judging from the look in his eyes. All that energy. Gone. You know, the last person I threw a sun at was my brother, Michael. We always had our differences, that soon stacked up to grievances, and one day, it all went to hell with him piercing his sword through my chest and me shoving a star up his nose. His eyes shone with a hint of reminiscing. Sigh. Good times. So. Those red eyes shone with smoldering intensity. How does it feel to be the second? His battle with his brother Michael was eons ago. That particularly skirmish of theirs shook the multiverse to its core. Lucifer was called the Morning Star. His name literally meant bringer of suns. So it was understandable to use blazing stars in the place of fireball projectiles during fights, right? Michael had been the only person worthy enough to be on the receiving end of that one. Perhaps it was due to being in the midst of a heated battle, but not once had Michael ever absorbed his attacks before. Shrug them off. Yes. Absorb them? Not quite. Especially not with such ease. Perhaps he could, perhaps he couldn't. For beings like Lucifer, the extent of their powers had transcended anything measurable. Amari's expression remained unchanged. I feel like flossing your posterior with your scrotum. Ha ha ha. In response to his words was hearty laughter. Oh, you can most certainly try. With his laugh dying down, he uttered with an expansive grin. I made that sun as violent as it could get. So I will take it that energy attacks do not work on you. Amari couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Creating a sun so casually? Talk about showing off. Neither of them showed the slightest bit concern that the casual attack had just vaporized 15 million people on estimate at the very least. Oh, and by the way. Those were my lines you just stole, mister. His eyes glowed red. Now then. Let's have some fun. Chapter 157. Snap. The moment his eyes glowed, everything changed. Those red eyes were followed with intense pressure greater than what he had ever experienced. Amari felt the air stiffen and the surrounding matter grow thick. The feeling wasn't unfamiliar to him. It was the feeling of the planet's gravity multiplying to unimaginable heights. The increase acted on everything around, weighing down on his body and slowing his movements. Amari remembered facing a similar situation in a fight against a powerful being on a soon-to-be wrecked planet just like this. That was Darkseid. In an attempt to get around his ability to absorb energy, Darkseid had resorted to manipulating gravitational force to restrict his movements. He achieved partial success with the addition of chronokinesis. Obviously, Lucifer was resorting to similar tactics. The only difference being that the scale simply wasn't on the same level. Gravity was one of the few things Amari's energy absorption had no effect on. Darkseid using it against him wasn't really much of a problem. But this wasn't Darkseid. I can't move. At the moment, he found himself stuck in place, incapable of advancing or retreating an inch. That's one. Snap. That thought had barely settled when the space around him was suddenly enveloped in a white hazy light. Luca could feel his already minuscule movements slow down even more. What the hell? That's two. Lucifer uttered with a brilliant smile while snapping his fingers once again. Snap. The world suddenly lost color as everything stilled completely. Yet again, another move that he was familiar with. The difference being he was the one who usually used it on others. Not the other way around. Increased gravity. Speed reduction. Time freeze. A 3-in-1 package, all with monstrous magnitude released by a monster himself. Now then. Absorb this for me, will ya? He uttered while raising his hand to the sky. Then, with a slight clench, a sudden change occurred. Anyone looking at the moon right now would discover that a red glow enveloped the surface, spreading in all directions. As he clenched his hand, cracks emerged all over the surface with a sizable chunk of the moon being carved out. The carved-out area broke apart before being pulled down towards the Earth at the speed of light. Hundreds of large meteors streaked into the Earth's atmosphere, heading straight for the hole that was once Gotham. Damn it! The motionless energy being had his eyes light up with a blue glow. Following which, the space before him swirled and distorted rapidly. The meteors struck down the moment he did. Due to Lucifer's control, they didn't cause widespread damage, but all aimed in Amari's general direction. However, the swirling space proved an obstacle as the meteors were transported away before they could inflict any damage. At that moment, Amari's blue eyes shifted to a certain direction. Dimensional transportation. Lucifer's thoughts were interrupted by the following developments. As while his gaze was on Amari, the space behind him swirled and the meteors he had released reappeared out of thin air. Behind me. Sensing the disturbance behind him, he raised 2 fingers without turning back. Time froze. With dozens of burning meteors still aflame behind his back, Lucifer let out a smile. Good move. Then. Time resumed as the meteors escaped suspended animation and shot forward again, bypassing Lucifer with curves that weren't possible to achieve through human cognition. Their destination? It had never changed. And under his gaze, they streaked towards Amari at astounding speeds and upon making contact, passed right through him. This scene alone made Lucifer's eyes brighten with curiosity. He can still escape unscathed under a triple containment. Interesting. The man who was literally Satan himself thought inwardly. Then his eyebrows narrowed as Amari's body began to fade. Fade? Running away now, are we? Just as the devil furrowed his eyebrows, Amari's fading figure let out a slight smirk. Before Lucifer could understand, a figure emerged from the swirling space behind him, with dark hair, blue eyes and a massive ball of chaotic destructive energy spinning on the palm of his hand. My turn. Amari uttered as he slammed down hard with the dark red energy ball. As for how Lucifer wasn't able to react to the attack from the swirling space behind him. After diverting the meteor attack, Amari had never closed it. Bang! The dark red ball came in contact with the devil and exploded upon impact. Cataclysmic energy erupted, turning into an explosion that spread in all directions. Previously, Lucifer had slammed him with a sun. How could Amari sleep peacefully without returning the favor? A large amount of energy was discharged into the surroundings once again, turning into a massive explosion akin to a nuclear bomb. Only this time, the blast wasn't aimed to spread out but aimed downwards. The blast wave drilled deep into the earth, rushing towards its very core and destabilizing the gravitational force that held the planet together. Boom! The whole planet shook to its core as the earth ruptured. Hawaii. A moment later, a volcano that had proved to be dormant suddenly turned red. Following which, a large amount of molten lava emerged from its depths and spewed into the air without so much as a second's warning. The citizens had barely come to their senses from the first planetary quake when the sky above their heads changed color. They all looked up, horror appearing in their eyes as burning magma rained from the skies in full force. Atlantic Ocean. Atlantis. Crack. The sound of cracking earth appeared, startling the sea creatures. Poseidones. The capital of Atlantis. Aquaman sat on his throne, dark creases crowding his forehead, with his fist resting on his chin and a blank expression. After Amari's charade with Ocean Master, Arthur Curry had taken time away from the Justice League to tend to his family and organize his kingdom. Boom! A loud rumble destroyed the silence of the throne room, startling the Underwater King. What's happening? He had barely finished his question when the earth below him suddenly split apart. The walls began to crumble and one half of the ocean floor began to rise upward. Aquaman's eyes widened as he shot upward, abandoning his throne before it was swallowed by the widening crack. A sea quake. How? Crack. He was interrupted yet again as the ceiling of the palace collapsed upon itself, falling inward. The poor king practically didn't know what hit him as large rocks slammed into his back, pushing him back down the way he came. Aquaman, king of Atlantis, fell into a crack on the ocean floor. While the palace was still collapsing, a tinge of red emerged in the crack. A few seconds later, large amounts of molten magma erupted from the cracked areas. The change in balance of the earth didn't just affect the seafloor. Miami. Look over there. A loud discordant scream interrupted the happy-going beach lovers on the beach shores of Florida, Miami. People looked towards the sea waters only to find a massive tidal wave emerging from the distance. Before the scream, it was just a much larger wave than usual. Until it grew bigger and bigger and bigger and everyone's eyes constricted to the point of needles upon seeing the massive tsunami heading their way. Run. Splash. The large water wave washed over the Miami shores, drowning the beach lovers into its depths. Unfortunately, it didn't stop there. As today was one of those rare occurrences where the ocean disobeyed nature and moved way beyond the seashore boundary. Millions of tons of seawater flooded onto land, destroying everything in its path. Miami was ruined. Paris. After the loud earthquake, no one experienced anything unusual at first. Damn. Another earthquake. A man going out with his family on an evening stroll muttered under his breath. The rumbling was particularly strong. Several car accidents had taken place right before their eyes. Okay everyone, let's get back home. Back inside. His wife didn't question. Turning to get her children to turn around. Okay everyone, let's go. Isaac, Liam, Jojo. Ha! Jojo. The mother turned and was stunned to find her youngest daughter missing. Jojo. Jojo. Her daughter's absence was immediately met with panic as his eyes darted in all directions. Sweetie. Jojo. Ah. At that moment, a high-pitched squeal resounded throughout the block from above, causing everyone who heard it to wince. The mother's eyes widened, looking upward, only to see her daughter floating in the air. "Jojo! You!" she exclaimed in disbelief. However, a loud creaking sound came from behind. Under everyone's gazes, a very heavy car actually detached from the floor and floated into the air. It seemed like the sign for a whole new round of chaos, as the Earth's gravity faltered and everything began to lose its grip on solid ground. Cars, trucks, items, people. Wow! Whoa! Whoa! What's going on? A young delivery guy exclaimed in fright as he found himself flying into the air alongside his pizza. Oh! Oh my God! I can fly. Following the initial panic was a burst of excitement at the development before his eyes. I can fly. He yelled in ecstasy. This means I have superpowers. I can't believe it. I'm going to be a hero. His words were cut short as the loose gravity in his area was restored. Unable to react, the poor pizza delivery guy fell face first, slamming hard against the pavement. Ow! A burst of pain flooded through his nose as blood flowed. Arg! It's okay. Don't call an ambulance, I'm fine. Bang! A shadow enveloped him. Following which, the truck which had risen earlier fell back to the earth, crushing the youth into nothing but meat paste. Volcanoes erupted, tsunamis erupted, the sea floor reared its rocks out of the ocean, and whole cities were destroyed by earthquakes and gravitational imbalances. Millions died in the first second, and thousands more with each passing one. It was Armageddon. At that moment, everywhere in the world descended into chaos as Earth fell into the cycle of destruction. Unfortunately, that cycle was destined to fall short as the perpetrators were fully determined to accelerate the damn process. Ha ha ha. Loud laughter emerged from the large hole that was once Gotham. The energy aftermath dispersed and what emerged was Lucifer in slightly ruffled clothes. It's been a long time since someone landed a hit on me. His eyes twinkled with cunning viciousness as he rolled up his sleeves. Alright, I'm game. I'll play with you. Chapter 158. It's been a long time since someone landed a hit on me. His eyes twinkled with cunning viciousness as he rolled up his sleeves. Alright, I'm game. I'll play with you. His voice had barely fallen when he disappeared in place. No. Amari's eyes condensed as he felt a slight stir from his left. He raised his hand to attack. Bang! The strike turned into a block as the attack came much faster than expected. The collision sent yet another shockwave into the atmosphere, shattering the surrounding land around them. Right before his eyes was the devil with his classic cunning smirk. Nah. Amari, who wanted to retaliate, felt the world's gravity increase yet again, infinitely slowing down his movements. Damn it. Amari narrowed his eyebrow, attempting to transfer himself into his dimension, but felt the heavy weight concentrated on his form. Gravity at its extreme could suppress space movement. It just depended on who used it. And at the moment, Amari felt like the weight of the universe was resting on his shoulders. The accuracy of that statement was debatable, but that's how he would describe it. Isolate. His blue eyes glowed even brighter as he gave his command. Energy trapped within his form stirred restlessly and began to act on reality itself. In a split second, Lucifer's passed right through Amari's body as he successfully isolated himself from the gravitational influence. Sucking himself into space, he reappeared a distance away, dark red energy leaking from his being as he fired a cataclysmic energy blast. Lucifer thrust his arms forward. The space around him turned into a broken mirror, swallowing the energy attack upon contact. The next moment, the mirror changed color, turning dark red and turning into a swirling ball with destructive momentum. With a slight thrust, the ball was sent back at his opponent at an immeasurable speed. Gravity acting on it for good measure. Seeing this, Amari's telekinetic force spread out to form a barrier blockade. Shatter. Under their gazes, both forces made contact with the telekinetic force capable of crushing planets with ease, barely putting up resistance before being torn apart. The blast slammed into Amari, exploding and sending him flying back several feet into the air. The shockwave rushed out once again, before it was pulled back a second later. The blast being absorbed into his body and Amari's form appearing without a hint of damage. Stalemate. So this is what it feels like to fight against God's absolute will, huh? Amari thought with a slight frown, not attacking further. Just as difficult as I imagined. Their battle time frame was short, barely exceeding a few dozen seconds. Apart from the first attack, Amari hadn't been able to land a second blow of any kind. Meaning although this battle was now at a stalemate, throughout the short exchange, he was at a disadvantage. First time I've had to use energy to affect reality for my benefit in a fight before. His battle against Darkseid was basically fists, feet, and cataclysm. Other flashy abilities like the manifestation of the Cosmic Titan, Black Flames, Tsukiyomi, and the likes were basically just attacks he used for weaker opponents. The highest he had ever gotten to was the use of telekinesis. Using energy to influence reality. This could be counted as the first time. But against this opponent, it wasn't uncalled for. Compared to Lucifer, other enemies like Parasite, Darkseid, the Anti-Life Equation, Ares, and the so-called Loki were just small fries. This guy was an actual godlike being right here. Someone possessing abilities at high intensity that he couldn't just steamroll over like the rest of them. Gravity, time dilations. These were things he couldn't absorb. When used on him, he could only physically resist its effect. Darkseid could at most increase it by several thousandfold. But that's where the problem lay. What was the basis for Lucifer's power? The answer was will. Not just ordinary will, God's will. The power of the presence was the highest apex of the DC universe. Anything and everything he created was under his control. And as the incarnation of his will, Lucifer had control of all creation, which at this point, was second only to the presence himself. The implications? Absolute dominion. As the creator, everything in creation was his to control. Humans, aliens, matter, antimatter, stars, planets, forces, spectrums, aspects, energies, universes, time, space, dimensions, multiverses, realities and all godlike beings. Everything. From the lowest ant to the highest concepts. He could mend them, bend them, destroy them, turn them inside out, and change them as long as he willed it. He created it, he could exert that dominion to the highest level. This created his omnipotence as he could simply dismantle anything and everything he wanted to without it having the slightest ability to resist. Demiurgic power. Something that Lucifer possessed. As long as God created it, then he only needed a thought to undo its very existence. This was the reason Michael could serve as his only equal. As anything else required less than a snap of his fingers to be destroyed once it bothered him. No matter how strong they were or how much power they possessed. Even if it were possible, it wasn't, for anyone else to have more power than him, beating him wasn't. Just like an inventor who created a battle mech with artificial intelligence. No matter how strong the mech was, it was powerless in front of the creator who held a remote with a power-off button. All of creation was the giant mech robot and Lucifer was the bored creator sitting on a lounge chair and watching it go on a rampage with a remote that had a pause, play, rewind, fast-forward and off button. Death and the endless were no exceptions. Until today. As a being outside of God's jurisdiction, demiurgic power didn't work on Amari. Neither Michael nor Samuel could undo his existence. Nor could their will influence his form in any way possible. Just this feature alone had taken him from the position of a much stronger ant to an opponent worthy of notice. That left the only other option. If Lucifer wanted to kill Amari, then he had to engage in a head-on confrontation. But Amari's nature and ability to absorb energy destroyed a large amount of attack options, leaving only fewer existing variables. So since he couldn't affect him, Lucifer decided to affect everything else around him. That was where the problem laid. As long as he willed it, the gravitational power of the universe would weigh on Amari, preventing him from moving. Once that was successful, he wouldn't be able to defend himself from successive attacks and could only receive them passively. He's controlling the matter everywhere to restrict my movements. I can't absorb gravitational force or non-energy-based matter, so I can only consume my energy to counter his influence. But that's not an effective solution. His thoughts moved rapidly. He's the will of the presence. He doesn't have to expend anything to do anything. Everything will automatically do whatever he wants. I, on the other hand, have the exact opposite problem. This was the textbook explanation of his current situation. Just because demiurgic power had no effect didn't mean that Amari was invincible. Unless he wanted to be a fish on the chopping block, bombarded by one form of attack after another, active energy consumption was unavoidable. And the solution of one issue led to another. My energy capacity can't sustain a prolonged battle. This was the basis of Lucifer's nigh omnipotence. Second to one control over all of reality. After this confrontation, Amari realized that fighting against Lucifer like this wouldn't work. It didn't feel like he was just fighting Lucifer. No, it felt like he was fighting against the whole universe. Anything he couldn't absorb could and would be used against him. He could only fight with his own strengths and energy volume. As long as the gravitational force remained, Amari would have to use his energy to isolate it. The consumption required for that wasn't small. At least, depending on how long this would go on. A war of attrition wasn't in his favor. For the first time ever, Amari felt himself developing a headache. As for controlling the gravity to release its effect, Amari was certain that his energy reserves wouldn't sustain such an endeavor. Wresting away control from Lucifer was improbable. It's like fighting in someone else's domain. So restrictive. He thought with his gaze fixed on his opponent. Meanwhile, Lucifer was doing the same thing. Those red eyes shone with intense scrutiny and intrigue. His amused face made it hard to tell what he was thinking. Fascinating. The devil uttered inwardly. I lost all control of the injected energy in the last attack. The last energy attack wasn't simply for show. Lucifer had infused a wisp of his own moral within it in an attempt to destroy, invade or control Amari from within. Result. Nothing. Amari's figure was imprinted in his gaze, hundreds of future possibilities emerging within his subconscious as his nigh omniscience worked hand in hand with his cosmic awareness to deduce countless possible attack patterns. The results weren't very satisfying. Mind control. Ineffective. Energy attacks. Time dilations. Black holes. Time loops. Threads of fate. This one was just as ineffective as demiurgic power. What a troublesome creature. Unexpectedly difficult to deal with. He had seen what this creature could do. Similar to how he could isolate himself from gravity, he would do the same for time loops, shift himself from black holes, and at worst, Lucifer would punch again and again when Amari's energy reserves were exhausted after a long period of battle. This was only one of many possibilities, and the time and persistence required to achieve this was not something he wanted to put himself through. This also required him to seal the surrounding space to make sure he didn't simply transport himself away elsewhere to absorb several stars and come back for several hundred more rounds. This wasn't an exaggeration. It actually happened. TCH. Watching these futures, never before had he felt so irritated. This was the first time he disliked peering into the future, not because he found it boring but because he couldn't find a solution to his problem. The result ended with him unable to get past his energy absorption. Each physical attack only serving to power him with transformed kinetic energy. From the looks of it, this battle would never end unless... Wait. A thought emerged. Kinetic energy. Following which, he began to deduce the future based on a targeted scenario. In that case, let's try something new. Seeing a future that actually produced results, Lucifer immediately put it into action with a gleam in his eyes. Meanwhile, the world was in chaos. Chapter 159. Meanwhile, the world was in chaos. For all humans all over the earth, it looked like the end times promised in the book of Revelation had finally come. Ironically, world destruction wasn't happening on just one Earth. Dark multiverse. Earth -1. Rumble. The ground under their feet trembled once again, causing everyone's expressions to harden. From its initial state, the frequency had risen sharply. So much so that 10 minutes later, it now shook every 2 minutes. Earth -1 was collapsing. Yet, the heroes young and old could do nothing but listen as the league leaders of two different realities tried to come up with a solution. Is there anything else? Bruce asked. That's all I can tell you. Clark replied helplessly. Batman didn't reply. His posture as if thinking. Time elapsed. In this silence, until... All right. Have you figured out a solution? Wally West, -1, couldn't help but speak up what was on everyone's mind. Unfortunately. No. Bruce replied curtly. Don't you mean not yet? I mean not at all. His words caused their hearts to sink. Before all this happened, the League was never prepared for such a situation. And even if we were, he would have destroyed the tools to achieve it. Everyone knew who he was referring to. Their recently deceased Superman who destroyed the Watchtower. Then that's it. We failed. As much as I hate to admit it. Yes. Bruce uttered with clenched fists. Wrong, mate. A loud voice carrying a British accent fell into their ears. It happened then. Just when everyone was startled, a gold-colored circular portal made of exquisite glyph symbols appeared not far away out of thin air. A second later, two figures stepped out of it. Blonde short hair, blue eyes, and wearing a devil's trench coat. The figure at the forefront was none other than the infamous John Constantine. Well then. His gaze instantly scanned the group. Where the bloody hell did these guys show up from? John. Batman turned, slightly surprised. You died. Tell me something that's actually new. The Englishman replied apathetically. As someone who dealt with demons, this wasn't his first rodeo with death itself. In Earth-1, the sorcerer had died twice. Even making it back in time for his own funeral the second time. In such a situation, Constantine could describe it in 4 words. Been there, done that. Clark raised an eyebrow. Who is this guy? You're telling me that you don't have a John Constantine in your reality? Not really. At least, I've personally never heard of him. Is that a good or bad thing? Bruce didn't reply at first. Well, it depends on how you view it. No offense, John. None taken. The sorcerer didn't even bat an eyelid. Stopping a few feet away, his face took on a serious expression. From the way he speaks, I assume you aren't the mass-murdering maniac aiming to maim us all. He uttered with his gaze lingering on Superman, before turning to the Dark Knight. Our Clark is dead. They're allies. Bruce explained. All right. Finally, some good news today. I wish it was. The caped crusader replied with an ugly expression. Clark had told him that the destruction of their world was due to the death of the person who wanted to destroy them all. In that case, how could his death be considered good news? Unfortunately. It's not going to matter in a few minutes. I've been informed. He uttered before taking a step to the side. As a result, the man standing behind him instantly came into view. That's where he comes in. Feeling everyone's gaze on him, the phantom stranger didn't react and remained silent. At that moment, John Constantine turned around. All right then, Mr. Stranger. I've already agreed to your conditions. Now it's time to pull up your end of the bargain. In response, John received a nod. Following which, the phantom stranger's white eyes, previously obscured by his fedora, began to glow. A swirling vortex of mystical energy gathered at his fingertips and began to form spell runes in the air. Powerful gusts of wind emerged, blowing in all directions. What's he doing? Bruce asked solemnly. You, all might want to step back for this one, mates. John didn't answer Bruce's question. A golden magic circle emerged behind him which he walked right through without delay. Seeing this, everyone else immediately followed. The portal closed, and the group was teleported several miles away. Meanwhile, the phantom stranger continued his actions unabated. With his palms opening wide, the magic runes grew infinitely larger and larger. His cape billowed with the fierce winds as sand and dust were blown in all directions. The phantom stranger stood tall, his eyes gleaming with determination as he began to chant the words of the ancient spell. The surrounding air began to swirl with an otherworldly energy, and the fabric of reality started to tremble. By the power of the cosmos, I call upon the forces of balance and order. As he spoke, a brilliant light burst forth from his outstretched hands, illuminating the desolate wasteland that was once Metropolis. The light spread, engulfing the entire world. Far away, be it Superman, Constantine or the young heroes, everyone was forced to close their eyes for a split second due to the overwhelming light. Eventually, it all receded. And when it did... Holy freaking holy! The first thing Kid Flash saw caused him to cuss subconsciously. For the shock, he wasn't the only one. Are you all seeing this? It was no wonder. As presently, the destruction of the world was being undone. Buildings rose from the rubble, their crumbling facades restoring themselves to their former glory. The streets, once littered with debris, became clean and pristine once more. The very earth itself began to heal, as if the wounds inflicted upon it were being sewn shut. As they watched, the distorted reality began to unravel, restoring the city to its former glory. By the gods! Diana whispered, awestruck. What? What kind of magic is this? Miss Martian asked, eyes wide. It's not magic, kid. John cut in, it's reality manipulation. One on a cosmic scale. John carried an expression similar to Batman at the moment. A grim one. Just what have I gotten myself into? He thought, resisting the urge to rub his hair in frustration. A flash of light illuminated the skies. The phantom stranger disappeared on the spot, appearing right before the group of heroes. Your universe has been corrected, he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Corrected? Indeed. The phantom stranger continued, all consequences of your Earth's Kryptonian have been reversed. Those slain will be restored. Constantine nodded, understanding in his eyes. You've undone the damage. That was the deal, John Constantine. Restoring to you all that you have lost. Friends and allies, enemies and adversaries. Both the good and the bad. I have kept my end of the bargain. Both the good and the bad. Constantine caught up with the last words. He wasn't the only one. Bruce, with a not-so-good-looking expression, decided to speak up. You're saying you brought everyone back? Yes. Including villains? Yes. His face grew ugly for a split second. He opened his mouth to speak, but Diana beat him to him. What about Superman? Your Superman's actions have consequences. To avoid a repeat, I took it upon myself to leave his end as it is. He will not return. Batman turned to Constantine. You understand the implications. We will have to deal with the fallout. The Joker, Darkseid, Lex Luthor, Mr. Mind. They would all return. Constantine nodded. Some demons can't be killed twice, Batman. But we'll resolve that later. This had been a long day. All right then. Now that it's over, why don't you go ahead and tell us the consequences what you've done here will incur. This time, the stranger didn't respond. Hold on. What consequences? Isn't this it? Wally West, -1, asked. Not quite, mate. He interrupted. I don't expect you to know. Dimensional warping and similar shit isn't part of your job description. Even I'm not exactly sure what he has done. His eyes never left the man before him as he spoke. But things like this always come at a certain cost. He ended there, not bothering to elaborate deeper. Now I can only hope that the cost isn't something that'll immediately kill us all. At the moment, behind his straight facade was a worried heart and a troubled mind. The fate of your universe has been forcibly altered. Balance will need to be restored. Phantom Stranger replied. Balance? What do you mean? Every action elicits a reaction as a counterbalance. In response to what I have done, the universe will create changes however it sees fit. As for whether those changes are for better or worse, I cannot say. I can only advise you to prepare yourselves for a possible crisis. His words halted. Oh my. And this was followed by a long period of silence. Seeing this, John raised an eyebrow. Oi, everything all right? It couldn't be helped. The Phantom Stranger's behavior was odd. Clark and Bruce could see it. The Phantom Stranger turned to look at Superman, Diana and the team behind them. Hey, why are you looking at us like that? There was no response. A bad feeling suddenly washed over the Man of Steel. But before he could voice his doubts, the Phantom Stranger turned to the side, stretched out his arm and... a light blue portal appeared in the middle of nowhere. If you want to save what's left of your world, come with me. Wait. What? His words stunned everyone. In their momentarily daze, the man had walked through the portal and disappeared. Clark, what is he? Wonder Woman turned and asked hesitantly. I don't know. But I have a bad feeling about this. His gaze shifted to Bruce beside them. Go. You've done enough for our word. Now go deal with whatever's happening on yours. We can take it from here. Clark nodded. Following which, he flew through the portal with his cousin in his arms. Superman left, the others naturally followed. Batman was not surprised by this. He was, however, surprised when he saw Constantine going towards the portal as well. John. The man paused. Is it the deal? I'm afraid so, mate. The Englishman replied. Our world's fixed. The guy's held up his part of the bargain. Time to hold up mine. There was a moment of silence. Until. All right. Take care of yourself. Bruce didn't inquire any further. The blonde-haired man turned around, his face sporting a shallow smile. Cheers, mate. Then he turned back and walked towards the portal. Take care of Zatanna for me. Those were his last words before he disappeared. the portal automatically disappearing with him. "Bruce!" Wally called out hesitantly. "What do we do now?" "Set our world straight," the Batman replied, "and prepare ourselves for whatever may follow." Today, his worldview had been widened. When accounting for everything he had experienced, Bruce never thought it was even possible. He needed to prepare, make plans, and countermeasures. The man in a bat suit tightened his fists unconsciously. He would never let the tragedy his world had just experienced happen again. Whatever crisis was coming, this time, he would be ready for it. Or so he thought. Meanwhile, Metropolis. The city had literally been made new. Everything and everyone that died in the past 2 years was brought back to life. The giant crater that once occupied the land was gone, and in its place, the bright, illustrious city that was Metropolis. The Phantom Stranger's spell had done all this. Unfortunately, however, it has done more than what anyone bargained for. As unbeknownst to everyone, in the sewers of the city beneath the earth, a figure stirred. Finding himself within the restored underground cavern, the Batman who laughs opened his eyes. Ha 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 ha. Wild laughter was released from his lips, a maniacal grin spreading across his face. That was fun. Ha 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 ha. And with that, the darkness began to stir, as the Batman who laughed started to laugh once more, his eerie chuckles echoing through the depths of the earth, a harbinger of chaos to come. Bruce didn't know that for Earth-1 of the negative multiverse, the crisis had come. Much, much faster than anyone ever expected. Meanwhile. Earth 16. Chapter 160. Meanwhile. Earth 16. A portal suddenly opened in an open space. Thud, thud, thud. An able-bodied man with white eyes, blue clothes and a fedora stepped out of the portal and stood in place. Less than a few seconds later, the portal flashed again as several figures stepped out. "Hey, hold on. What in hell do you?" Clark first caught the figure of the Phantom Stranger. Then in between his sentences, his eyes caught something else. "What the?" Those pupils widened in shock. This is. As right before his eyes, large buildings could be seen floating in the skies. Or at least, half of them anyway. Among them, Clark's eyes fell on one that was all too familiar. He would know, he worked there. Metropolis. The Phantom Stranger finished. Or what's left of it. The floating half of the Daily Planet was in sight. Horror emerged in his eyes at what had happened to the city. Metropolis was in ruins. The portal behind him flashed as the rest emerged. By Hera. Diana was equally shocked. "Oh my God. Is this? No. It can't be." Superman shook his head in disbelief. "We weren't even gone for an hour. How could this happen?" He didn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. Unfortunately. Bang! The flying buildings suddenly plummeted to the ground. Upon impact, the earth trembled as the earth was upheaved from the floor. Alright, now what did I miss? Constantine, the last of them, had just stepped out of the portal when he saw the scene akin to a natural disaster sweeping towards them. Holy freaking! The earth upheaval rushed over them. Time elapsed. John, in a flinching posture, opened his eyes to see nothing had happened. A blue shield had enveloped them like a shield. "Is this your universe?" John asked in disbelief. How did this one seem so much worse than his? "It's. Something's happened, Anne. Take cover." At that moment, the Phantom Stranger yelled hurriedly. Before anyone could react, a black dot miles away tore through the air and slammed down their direction in the blink of an eye. The shield created by the Phantom Stranger seemed as fragile as paper, shattering into pieces. The black dot slammed headfirst, knocking him into the distance. The shockwave didn't spare anyone else either, as Superman, Diana, and the rest of the team were blown away. Boom! Following which, it slammed into the earth, bouncing off it several times before finally crashing. A massive crater emerged as it crashed, unearthing everything around it. Dust and debris flew in all directions. Ugh! After a period of silence, a pained groan emerged. A hand burst out from underneath the rubble. Following which, it quickly pushed aside the rocks pressed upon it, revealing a man in red and blue tights. Taking a look at Kara in his arms, he let out a breath before observing his surroundings with Kryptonian vision. "It's wrong. Everything's all wrong. The Earth's gravitational field was going haywire. Stable in some places and completely out of order in others. These states could switch at any time. That explained the flying buildings. This is Superman to all Leaguers. Is anyone there? He touched his intercom, hoping for a response. None came. I repeat, this is Super. Boom. An explosion nearby interrupted him. Turning his head, all he saw was large rocks flying in his direction, carried by a mighty shockwave. His eyes turned red, heat vision emerging and blasting the projectiles to pieces. The shockwave, however, still pushed him into the distance. It took him a few seconds to stabilize his figure in the air, before turning his gaze to the direction of the attack. The dust settled. Under his gaze, a dark-haired youth with fair skin and glowing blue eyes appeared. Someone Superman was all too familiar with. Amari. So he's behind this. The dark-haired youth stood up from the rubble. At that moment, the Man of Steel had his eyes widen. Because as Amari stood to his feet, a light blue glow could be seen on his chest. That wasn't the point, though, as alongside that was a weapon embedded into his chest. The key point being, embedded. Clark couldn't believe his eyes. Was Amari injured? POV change. The dark-haired youth stood up from the rubble. Taking a look at the sword piercing into his chest, Amari couldn't help but frown. I actually felt that. The weapon had penetrated his skin, a faint light revealing on the edge areas. He raised his right hand and placed a firm grip on the weapon's hilt. The short sword was pulled out. No blood flowed. He never had any to begin with. Instead, a bursting blue light shone from his chest area for a split second. Of course, it was only for a second. A moment later, it healed completely without leaving a scar. The light disappeared, covered up by extremely dense flesh. Regardless, however, Amari's expression wasn't the slightest bit good-looking. I did not expect this. He thought while examining the blade before him. No laws, no rules, no order, no chaos, nothing concrete to base itself on. Yet, it actually exists. These were his thoughts before he tossed the blade aside. Moving his gaze upward to where it needed to be. As high in the air, stood the devil himself. A cunning smile lighting up his features as he finally found a solution to his problem. The answer was simple. So simple yet almost impossible to achieve. Energy attacks were useless. So that left only physical attacks as the only option. But how do you defeat someone who could absorb kinetic energy from all physical attacks? Easy. Take kinetic energy out of the equation. In the laws of physics, that was impossible to implement as energy couldn't be created nor destroyed. Only converted. Such a possibility was simple: the complete erasure of the physical laws and behavior of matter and energy. For humans, it wasn't even a concept worth considering. But what if you weren't human? What if you had the power to change reality as you pleased, with nothing but a single thought? Lucifer had done so. The previous attack was simple: a test. Creating a weapon with no physical or natural laws to govern it. It could move but produced no energy of any kind. This was why it could bypass Amari's energy absorption. Lucifer had wiped away all natural laws governing matter and energy upon creating the blade, so in the moment of contact, there was no obstruction as there was no energy to absorb. Then came the natural defenses of the body. The result. It failed. In a moment of carelessness, Amari had gotten stabbed through the chest, the force pushing him back towards the earth during their fight. Two pairs of eyes locked onto each other. The hostility within brewing to the extreme. No. It happened then. A giant magic rune appeared out of thin air. The surrounding space was locked instantly. Cease your battle. Or you will invoke severe harm on this universe. A figure flew out from the distance. He quickly stood in between Lucifer and Amari, seemingly in an attempt to stop them from fighting more. It had results. Amari frowned. His legs that were gathering momentum came to a state of rest. Who is this guy? He had never met the phantom stranger before. On Earth-1, in the dark multiverse, the two didn't cross paths. But just because he didn't know him didn't mean someone else wouldn't. Lucifer, who was preparing to release another attack, stayed his hand. It's been a long time, stranger. He uttered with twinkling eyes. Nice to see old acquaintances. Samuel. The phantom stranger uttered, his expression heavy. How long has it been? 5. 6 million years. Lucifer's handsome features broke out into a devilish grin. In the time before creation, the presence had created the first three. Michael, Samuel, and Gabriel. They were the first angels to come into existence. And they certainly weren't the only ones. The phantom stranger shared two things in common with the devil. 1. They were both creations of the presence. 2. They were both fallen angels. Yes. Fallen angels. Although fallen in different ways. Lucifer had led a group of angels to rebel, failed and was ultimately cast out from heaven, becoming the first of the fallen as punishment. As for what the phantom stranger did that caused his fall from heaven. Well, the answer was simple really. Nothing. This wasn't a joke. He literally did nothing. When Lucifer led his rebellion, the beings of heaven had split into three sides. 1. Lucifer who sought to overthrow God. 2. Michael who fought against him. And 3. We have the ones who did nothing. The scarce minority of angels who stood on neither side and simply watched the show unfold. The phantom stranger belonged to this group. Unfortunately, despite not siding with Lucifer, they weren't going scot-free after Lucifer's defeat. These angels were similarly cast out. And while the others turned dark, he was condemned to forever walk the earth alone for all time. In a sense, they were acquaintances, ex-co-workers and brothers. But Lucifer never saw it that way. As all angels weren't created equal, only two were worthy of his attention. Michael and Gabriel. One was his only true equal and the other was not far off. These were the only brothers this prideful, arrogant and narcissistic devil recognized. The rest were simply slightly bigger ants and could all go to hell. Phantom stranger included. Well, sorry. If we were at Lux, I could have put aside whatever I was doing to show my hospitality, but I currently have an engagement. So why don't you scurry on along to whatever you were doing? It had always been like this. Even after their fall, they had only crossed paths twice, and Phantom had tried his possible best to stay out of his way. Not anymore, though. For the sake of this world, today, he couldn't. You need to stop. After a moment of silence, the man wearing a fedora spoke again. Making sure to choose his words carefully. Oh. The devil raised an eyebrow. Well, that's new. The cowardly bird has grown wings. Interesting. In speaking, he was referring to the stranger's new courage to intervene in his affairs. Like previously stated. All angels weren't born equal. The phantom stranger wasn't a regular among regulars in heaven. Once an angel became fallen, they would lose their immense holy powers and would have to reconfigure themselves from scratch. But stranger was an exception. Although fallen, he didn't turn into a demon but transformed into what he was today, retaining the power he once possessed. Basically, he was a boss among the fallen. Nevertheless, Lucifer wasn't even an archangel. He alongside Michael had transcended that tier and stood as demiurgic angels. Below them were the aspects of the presence and archangels like Gabriel who could rival certain aspects such aspects. Underneath were regular archangels and below that was the Pax Dei. Even at full strength, Stranger was ranked at the upper end of lowest level above. They weren't on the same level, and they both knew it. Well, at least he was an angel. Lucifer's tolerant nature would still allow the latter to speak. What really surprised him was the one who followed. A distance away, Clark had found Diana. "I'll be right back. Take care of her," he uttered while handing over Kara. Before Wonder Woman could say another word, he turned around and took to the skies. A red and blue figure flew into the air, stopping right beside the phantom stranger. With dark hair, blue eyes, a well-angled face and a solemn expression. Apart from Superman, who else would it be? Superman. Mr. Clark never really got a name, so he could only end on Mr. Then. He turned his gaze to the one in question. "Who is this?" "Stand back, Superman," the stranger warned solemnly. "I will handle this." Lucifer wasn't a being the Man of Steel could handle. He told Clark to back off, clearly aware of this. Unfortunately, Clark wasn't having it this time. Instead, his gaze locked onto the devil with incomparable sharpness. "Why are you destroying our world?" The stranger froze. As an angel, he had overlooked one thing. That was the weight of earth in Clark's heart. At this moment, no one knew just how hurt, saddened and furious the Man of Steel was. Look around, the earth was a mess. Worst of all, he could hear it all. Millions of people dying with each passing second. If not knowing that there was nothing he could do, If not seeing the miracle of a world being reborn with his own eyes, perhaps Superman would have gone crazy at this point. Each additional dead rested a heavy rock on his heart, and his tightly clenched fists that could shatter the hardest of diamond was enough to show just how much restraint he held. If not, he would have thrown his fist at Lucifer despite knowing that he might be no match. Everything he had ever known was falling apart. He had to try, or die trying. A flash of amusement appeared in the devil's eyes. Why do you care which toys I break? You. This world isn't a toy, Samuel. The stranger cut in. It is the nexus of all worlds within this universe. If you destroy it, all else will follow. You will be ending a universe with quadrillions of lives. If one wanted to destroy a universe, the method was simple. Destroy the earth. He. At that moment, Lucifer chuckled. Do you think I care? It happened then. Those words seemed to snap whatever reason Clark had left within him. Superman. Don't. Unfortunately, it was too late. Before the warning fell, Superman had already thrown his fist at the opponent's face. Clark never cared about how powerful the enemy was, or how severely underpowered he weighed in comparison. As long as he still had strength and there was no other option, he would fight. Fight against anyone for those he cared about. However, his hand paused in place. As if encountering an insurmountable obstacle. Admirable. I like you. Lucifer uttered. So instead of erasing you both, I'll spare your lives in another way. Amari might be immune to demiurgic influence, but these two clowns before his eyes were not. A cocoon of red light enveloped both men for a few seconds. Once it dispersed, two rats fell downwards from midair. Silence. Oh, my. Kid Flash didn't know how many times he had been shocked today. Wonder Woman was the same. Well, call me Bullocks. Barely 20 minutes on the job and my employer's been turned into a rodent. The visual impact on Constantine was the highest. Unlike the others, he knew who the phantom stranger was, making it difficult to accept what was before his eyes. He just turned them into rats? Amari saw his scene, his expression becoming weird. Although he wasn't affected, it was still odd. Now that the nuisances are out of the way, let's start playing big time. First, we'll get rid of all the unnecessary stuff. The devil uttered as he stretched his arms wide, unleashing his presence and powering full. Immediately, the space began to twist and contort. Like laws, rules, time. A fat distance away, cracks began emerging on the moon and the sun began to die out. Do tell though. Lucifer asked with curious eyes. Are you ready to die? Not quite. Seeing the surrounding space morph into something else entirely, Amari's frown deepened for a second. In your words, I'm game. You want to play? That frown disappeared in an instant, turning into a wide grin. In the face of external situations, when had he ever cared about the consequences? Then let's play big time. His words fell, and he removed the passive limit on his body's energy absorption. The next moment, unfathomable amounts of energy rushed into his being seemingly out of thin air. Things had gotten to this point. Being pushed this far, Amari had no other choice. At the same time, outside the DC multiverse, a black dot suddenly emerged at the center of an inconspicuous corner of the God sphere. It soon turned from a small black dot to a hole, to a larger hole. In realms all over the sphere of gods, the energies powering dimensions seemed to receive divine calling as it all rushed in one direction. The movement startled the inhabitants of Saudi realms, as magic, divine, order, chaotic energies gathered into the forest of a cyclone at a certain spot. Time elapsed as more and more gathered, and disappeared in the blink of an eye, in a perpetually endless cycle. The gods, deities, and dimension lords of all realms immediately took notice. Many of them had their expressions changed drastically. Someone was stealing energy from the god sphere. And at such a rapid rate. A lesser dimension lord who resided the closest didn't even have time to react. Not long after, his dimensional was sucked dry. Meanwhile, back in Earth 16. Lucifer's eyes almost popped out wide. What exactly was happening? He had searched through countless futures a few minutes ago. Why had he never seen anything like this? Under his omniscient gaze, Amari's energy reserves broke to new heights without stopping. He's siphoning the energy of countless dimensions. To fuel himself. Lucifer's eyebrows furrowed. This power didn't give off the aura of the source. Not did it radiate of antimatter. It was all positive energy. Within the current multiverse, there was only one place that had so much. He connected himself to the God sphere. Extraordinary. Lucifer watched with appreciation. Alright, let's end this. The next battle would probably shake the entire multiverse to its core. Once again, a smile graced the face of the King of Hell. Gladly. He uttered. However. Enough. When neither had made the first move, someone else did. A feminine voice fell into both their ears, followed by the ripping of space. Dark hair, pale skin, black clothes, sexy vibe. A silver ankh hung on a chain around her neck, and her top was covered with a black leather jacket. Her appearance instantly captured the attention of both men, causing them to raise their eyebrows. The newcomer was an old acquaintance to one and a familiar face to the other. You've had your fun, gentlemen. But unfortunately, playtime's over. Chapter 161. What would you do if you knew that death was coming for you? How would you react if you discovered that the Grim Reaper you had always heard about in tales, picture books, and the internet was quite literally at your doorstep? A tall yet hunched figure. A dreary, worn-out hood over its head and features consumed by darkness. Revealing nothing but a pair of glowing red eyes that could numb the scalp with a single look. Pale, bony hands with fingernails resembling claws. Firmly grasping either a sickle or a reaper blade in hand. Literally, the stuff of nightmares. Now throw that memory aside into the garbage bin, and imagine the same scenario where you find out that death was not the above terrifying image description fed to the general populace over the years, but an extremely hot, pale-skinned goth girl with a rather carefree character, and attractive facial features. Dee. The vision of gothic beauty stood before them. Her pale skin seemed to glow in the fading light, and her dark hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of night. Dee swept her gaze across the earth. Or the remnants of what was left. On her delicate features was a never-before-seen sternness. One which Amari had never had the chance to gaze on. A smile made its way to Lucifer's face. Always a pleasure to see you. What brings death by? A task to stop two arrogant blockheads from making a mess of creation. Haven't you had enough, Lucifer? Quite the contrary, dear, I haven't. The devil uttered with a wide grin. It's not every day I get the chance to exercise. This one has gone on long enough. He. He chuckled. The look in those bright red eyes giving off a dangerous vibe. I think you've got the whole pecking order wrong here, love. But do tell me what makes you think I've had enough. Listen to her, Samuel. At that moment, a voice came from behind them. Ha. Lucifer and Amari both turned around to see space warp before someone walked through it. Oh, it's you. The former raised an eyebrow at the new arrival. A tall, able-bodied man, bare-chested yet covered with a green cloak and a green hood, with ash complexion. You are taking your destruction too far this time. An act that is unlike you. He uttered, then turned his gaze to Amari. Because of him. And you are. I am the Spectre. The Wrath of God. His introduction allowed Amari to realize his identity. After taking a good look at him, the Spectre turned his gaze back to his original intent. My. The devil's smile never faltered. First death, now wrath. What a special gathering. Last time I checked, you two don't bother yourself in worldly affairs. Those red eyes suddenly narrowed sharply. Much less mine. In the face of his momentum, the Spectre remained unfazed. The moment you unleashed your field in the positive multiverse, this has escalated beyond that. It no longer just remains in the scope of your affairs anymore. You know better than anyone that the Earth is the nexus of each universe. Once it falls, all else follows. He paused slightly, before continuing. You also know the positive world can't handle your full power. Your actions will not only destroy this universe but also destabilize the multiverse as a whole. At that moment, space in another direction warped again. Your battle has already affected the sphere of gods. As this one here absorbed the energies it produces. Another figure emerged out of thin air. Only his outfit was far from being as eye-catching as the Spectre who dressed like a cosplayer going to Comic-Con. Appearing in sight was a head of shaggy hair, eyes as black as night, well-angled facial features, and flawlessly pale skin that would make a vampire bleed with envy. His entire attire from head to toe was all black. Including the black coat, shirts and pants. Just based on his looks and demeanor alone, he seemed to be the male version of Dee not far away. Amari was surprised to discover that that speculation wasn't far off. Dee. The man turned to Death and called out apathetically. Morpheus. She returned. This man was Morpheus. Also known as Dream, member of the Endless family and brother to Death itself. He. Well then, since even you've come out, this must be serious. Lucifer uttered with a chuckle. Dream of the Endless was an enigmatic figure. His character and behavior were something similar to that of a recluse. Most of his time was spent in his dimension called the dreaming, as he rarely involved himself in matters that had no direct relation or relevance to him. Just his appearance here was enough to speak volumes. It is. A voice replied to him, but it didn't come from anyone already present. In a similar fashion, another new arrival made his presence known just like everyone else. Only he was taller than everyone else. Sporting a robust frame and massive build beyond the specters and a head of short black hair, he stood on air with his hands behind his back and an expressionless face. Mar Novu. Or better known in his official title, the Overmonitor. Well, what do we have here? If the people before were just eye raisers, then the appearance of the Overmonitor truly surprised Lucifer. I have documented all events of this multiverse since the moment of its inception. I have seen countless civilizations grow and endless stars die. And in all this, I have never intervened. He paused, his face scrunching up. Today, I go against that rule, due to you, Lucifer. Me. Both of you. He turned to Amari, who had been silent this whole time. If your battle only destroyed Earth-16, then I would have stayed aside and considered it destiny. The Overmonitor was an extremely powerful being, created by the Hand Perpetua, alongside his two brothers. Despite possessing such force, he had only one job to do. That was to observe the life cycle of this multiverse and everything within it. Technically, the positive matter realm was under his jurisdiction. Nevertheless, he refrained from interfering simply because it would mess up his natural observation process. His job was to observe the natural universe and record his findings. If he intervened, then the whole point of natural observation would be ruined. But that no longer mattered anymore, because his abstinence would mean the destruction of the multiverse he was supposed to observe. Amari had absorbed so much power from the God Sphere to battle Lucifer. The latter was about to unleash his own power without reservations. Once the two actually fought, then the consequences were unimaginable. At least, the destruction of a single Earth was a trivial matter. Destroying the multiverse itself wasn't out of the question. In the face of such a possibility, the Overmonitor could no longer remain indifferent. Hence, his current presence. But your actions threaten to destroy the balance. I cannot be indifferent, so I hope you can stop. Dream of the Endless, Death of the Endless, the Wrath of God, the Spectre, and the Overmonitor. Any one of these figures were creatures at the top of the food chain, and such a united lineup was more than enough to power through almost everything in the multiverse. Unfortunately, they met one of the few exceptions. His name was Lucifer Morningstar. And if I refuse? The Monitor's face sank. The Spectre pondered blankly before uttering. We would rather not have it get to that point. To say such words with an expressionless face. Truly worthy of the Spectre. As a prime character suddenly transformed into a spectator, Amari was honestly surprised at the sudden turn of events. An uneasy silence enveloped the atmosphere. Among the group of new arrivals, which one wasn't an all-powerful being with cosmic awareness? Which one wasn't capable of manipulating space and time? And which one couldn't sense the lingering crisis that would occur if this fight was allowed to go one step further? I answer all three. Nobody. In DC past and future events, the Overmonitor's first appearance in the regular multiverse was during the Crisis of Infinite Earths. Before that, he had done nothing but watch creation from afar like a scientist documenting the behavior of experimental subjects. It literally took a giant antimatter wave threatening to destroy the multiverse before he made his first appearance. After all, if his object of observation was destroyed, what would he study? But the multiverse hadn't experienced Crisis on Infinite Earths yet, and Lucifer jumped out to cause trouble. Worst of all, he could do nothing about it. An interesting fact. Among the current gathering of powerful beings, Mar Novu, who monitored the events of the multiverse like an all-powerful god, was the weakest and easiest to kill. Lucifer could quite literally end his existence with a single thought. Death and Dream were the same. He hoped most of all that his matter could be resolved peacefully. You are destroying a universe with countless beings. Such acts are beneath you, are they not? Unfortunately, his hope fell through. Lucifer was a tolerant character. Quite chill and would ignore everyone and everything. Even considering attempts on his life as nothing but children's games, despite having the power to erase any and all offenders with a single thought. It was an indifference that could not be formed without Nye's supreme power and billions of years of existence. He had no fears, no natural enemies, nothing that could permanently end his life. Unless the presence wished it to be so, he literally couldn't die. However, such indifference could also be flipped the other way around to extreme persistence. Lucifer simply hadn't found anything worth his time, with the exception of those two worthless guys who succeeded in taking over his father's position as god of all creation for a while before he and Michael kicked them out. Even then, those guys still lived to see another day. Not made up. In the comics, it actually happened. It was different now. The possibility of escaping his father's grasp, leaving creation was within reach. Okay, not exactly easy, but still. Honestly, at this point, his interest had already begun to wane. But his indifference had always been voluntary, not coerced. Never before had it been the case, and these guys weren't qualified to change that. Quite the contrary, it only fueled his desire to do the opposite. It seems I have been too low-key in recent millennia. His words made everyone's expressions change. Things were taking a turn for the worse. No one is talking me out of this, he uttered. Not even you. Is that so, brother? A new voice emerged from behind. Lucifer's smile faltered for the first time. As behind him stood a man in white robes with blonde hair and white eyes. Exuding an unprecedented aura, rivaling Lucifer's. Saint Michael. The Archon. Michael. Lucifer turned around. Always so quick to assume the righteous role. All righteousness aside. The blonde-haired man began. I will not let you destroy our father's creation. No matter what happens. Please don't make me have to stop you. Michael was serious, and Lucifer knew it. When it came to creation, Michael was more dutiful than any of the Presence's children. So much so that he nearly sacrificed his life to keep it after the Presence abandoned it. Silence. The tension was so thick that it could be seen with the naked eye. Literally. The auras both archangels exuded was so powerful that it solidified into reality. Finally, one withdrew. Ha ha ha. Lucifer laughed. All right, Michael. You win this 1 inch. The archangel uttered, leaving his brother to breathe a sigh of relief. Lucifer knew Michael's bottom line, and Michael similarly knew his. Although they could never see eye to eye, had quite literally battled and killed each other, they were still brothers who saw the other as their one true equal. Talk about toxic relationships. Gabriel was far off in the face of such a bond, and had to be put aside. For Michael, only his father meant more. And of course, his daughter. On this note, Lucifer turned his gaze to Amari, who had been watching the show this whole time. Goodbye, little creature. I'll leave you some peace for the meantime. However, that smile re-emerged with a hint of seriousness. This is not over. Chapter 162. Chapter 163. Those were his last words before the Lightbringer turned into smoke, completely disappearing. Lit creature. Amari frowned in displeasure. The heavy, oppressive feeling was lifted with the disappearance of an archangel. And so, the energy sentient turned his gaze to the second one. Just in time too, as Michael's eyes moved in his direction. Another bout of silence began. Amari felt like a conversation was about to ensue when the Archon, another name for Michael, disappeared without a word. Okay. Amari raised an eyebrow. Turning to the other powerful beings, he could more or less see relief on their faces. Except the specter, of course. This guy's expression hadn't changed since the beginning. Well, among the group after Michael, he had the least to fear as the literal wrath of God. Lucifer couldn't kill him permanently. The Lightbringer is gone, this matter is settled. The specter uttered. Our job is done. Then, he disappeared instantly. Teleportation. Morpheus gave a nod, then he followed in his footsteps. Amari. Mar Novu called out right then. Amari could have sworn that he saw a drop of sweat on this guy's forehead. I would like to speak with you. If you wouldn't mind, that is. He uttered casually in a polite tone. Amari was silent. Not replying for several seconds, considering this. Are you opposed? The Overmonitor asked. Now. Whenever you are ready. All right. He nodded his head. Mar Nova reciprocated. Till then. That was all before he disappeared. With his disappearance, Amari frowned for a moment in thought. What exactly did the Over-Monitor want to speak to him about? He wasn't worried though. Just curious. But now wasn't the time for that, now was. Your ability to get into trouble astounds me. A feminine voice fell into his ears. Oh right, there was someone left. Turning his head, he saw death itself staring directly at him. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, and her full lips curved into a charming smile. Not everyone dares to provoke Lucifer. Amari raised an eyebrow, feeling she didn't complete that sentence. And lives to tell the tale? Huh. Oh no. There are a lot of those. After a few million years in hell, he lost a lot of his temper. Lucifer was so indifferent that he practically rolled his eyes and smiled at those who tried to kill him. The teasing and amusement in his eyes was like a man watching the schemes of a baby. Please note, babies can't scheme. That reference is just to show the disparity in mental awareness. The energy sentient was amused. Then, he turned his head back to Earth. A frown appearing on his face. It was. Well, he couldn't say any more. Just like Apocalypse back then. It was ruined. Everyone on it had died. No living souls left. For a moment, he turned to Didi incredulously. They just turned their backs and left the Earth like this? The Spectre, Dream, the Over-Monitor, Michael. They had all made an appearance to stop the battle between him and Lucifer, then patted their butts and left. Not one single one of them bothering to fix the Earth back to its original form. On that note, Didi chuckled. Those recluses have better things to do. Well, things they consider better than thankless effort. Well, that was pretty darn accurate. One was the wrath of God. It would be considered perfect if it didn't go around ending the Earth and its sinful humans as it was. The other was Morpheus, who looked like an overgrown teenager in emo mode. Mar Nova would not interfere in human happenings. As for Michael, he had no idea why. His perplexing mood lasted for a moment before he asked. Aren't you going to do something about it? In response, she rolled her eyes. I'm death, not a hero. What do you think? Okay, duly noted. The dark-haired male sighed before turning to planet Earth. Didi smiled. You going to save them, or just your Kryptonian girlfriend? To this note, he utterly ignored. And with a thought, time moved backwards. The scattered parts of the Earth came together and the dispelled energy was retracted to its core. I thought you were indifferent to everything that didn't concern you. Death uttered curiously, while watching his work. That you did whatever you wanted. This does concern me. Amari uttered in an apathetic tone with a slight shrug. Besides, people change. Famous saying, nothing's permanent. But boredom was a universal problem. Something that even an all-powerful being like Lucifer couldn't escape from. Currently, he had no plans to seclude himself away in his dimension. Hence, as his primary universe of residence, Amari saw no reason to let Earth-16 and its inhabitants fall into oblivion. And by the way, this is what I want. I find it uncomfortable to have the Earth getting destroyed like this. He would destroy it himself if he ever felt like it. For now. I can't have some people get off with such an easy death now, can I? His eyes narrowed. He was back on Earth, it was time to permanently settle some scores. Time elapsed. Soon, the Earth was reformed in all its glory. The gravity was restored to its original state, the buildings destroyed were reformed, the lives lost were reborn and the battle between two powerful beings had swept through their world, killing them. In the span of a few minutes, the Earthlings had lost their lives and had it given back to them. Not surprisingly, none of them would remember this incident. Many of them would live to see another day, some would have that same life taken away again in a matter of minutes, hours, days. Death embraced all. The only difference was I embraced some sooner than later. But while the vast majority of the humans on Earth-16 would have their future existence determined by fate, a certain special group had already had theirs decided a long time ago. For two in particular, it was judgment time. Time waited for no man, and 15 minutes passed in a flash. Which brings it all back to the future, in the League of Assassins HQ at the Caribbean Sea. The whole island trembled fiercely from the power of the attack. Avalanche occurred and plants were uprooted all over. Numerous mountain animals died as a result. As for Ras Al Ghul's headquarters, it had practically been reduced to rubble. At this point, the building structures were nothing but debris. Half the cliffside had crumbled into rubble, sinking down into the area below alongside the bodies with it. It was a 400-foot drop. Even if the assassins weren't killed by the initial shockwave and weren't scattered to pieces by the debris, there was no chance in surviving a fall from that height. The ruins were silent, save for the sound of falling rocks. It seemed like the attack had killed everyone in the base. But, there would always be exceptions. For example, crack. The sound of shifting rubble entered the atmosphere. Small, progressive shifts until it elicited louder movements. Rumble. Near a certain area, rocks could be seen being pushed away as several hands stuck out of the rubble. The large stones were pushed aside. Thud. What fell into view was the sight of several figures in torn black robes. The shadows of the League of Assassins. Ra's al Ghul's elite group of ninjas. Unfortunately, many areas of their clothing, from arms to legs, had multiple rips revealing equally damaged skin. Other parts for some were directly missing body parts, like arms, shoulders, and chunks of flesh from their faces. Looking at their backs, their uniforms were basically torn apart as pieces of rubble could be seen embedded into their flesh, or what was left of it. The worst of them had their backbones revealed in plain sight. Bright red blood flowed from all of them without exception, each having it emerge from multiple areas of their being. Yet despite their bodies being in such horrible states that could make even the toughest men scream in agony, they didn't utter a single sound of pain. No screams, no yells, no grunts, no groans. Instead, more than a dozen of them stood in a circular shape, surrounding a certain area that was free from rubble. At their center was two familiar figures. Damian Wayne and Talia al Ghul. The Shadow Soldiers. Damian uttered, realizing what had happened. In sharp contrast to the miserable conditions of the assassins, Talia and her son, with the exception of some dust, both looked fine. Understandable, since these assassins had basically used themselves as human shields to block the destructive impact that threatened to kill them all. The Shadow Guards were Ra's al Ghul's highest combat unit. As the top of all ninjas in speed, strength and skill, each one had the qualifications to fight for the best fighter in the world. However, their work was simple. Protect the demon's head. Yes, day in and day out, they were Ra's personal bodyguards who served to protect his safety at all times. Even when he might not need it. Only a direct order from Ra's himself could make them do something else. Of course, there was one rule that took priority over all others. Protect the Damian Wayne, the heir, at all costs. And so they did. When Amari had slammed his cosmic fist to destroy the place, these soldiers had appeared right around Talia and Damian. There was no time to take them to safety. Hence, they shielded them with their bodies and bore the brunt of the shockwave. By using their bodies as meat shields, Damian and Talia would suffer the least damage while they bore the burden. It was a success. Talia and Damian would live to see another day. Unfortunately, they wouldn't. It seemed that the will to make sure they successfully carried out their orders to the end were what held them. After confirming the states of the mother and son, thud. Each one, without exception, fell to the ground and lost all signs of life. The blast had basically ripped off their flesh and severely damaged their internal organs. One even had a rock piercing through his chest. It was a wonder how they managed to stand at all. Damian's eyes shrunk. This wasn't the first time seeing people die. In the League of Assassins, death wasn't a foreign concept. But they died a worthy death. Talia uttered. The Shadow Guards weren't the same as the other assassins. They were all genetically modified superhumans with enhanced physiques similar to Deathstroke. Out of 1,000 trials, they were the only survivors. Now, they were nothing but corpses. Not just them. Talia opened her mouth to speak. However, blurg. A mouthful of blood was spat out from her mouth. Mother. I'm fine. She uttered and raised her head to examine her surroundings. The HQ of the League of Assassins was destroyed. Rock and rubble literally surrounded them. Our home. Damian's expressionless facade broke as he saw the destruction before him. We can't stay here anymore. Let's. Her gaze moved to the side and her voice froze. They sacrificed their lives to protect you. On a protruding platform sat Amari with his chin resting on one hand. The dark-haired youth tilted his head to the side. I don't know if it should feel touching or cruel. It should be a touching scene of such sacrifice under normal circumstances. But the fact that these assassins who just died were nothing but brainwashed tools who would literally be forgotten 30 seconds later was what made it feel conflicting. Do tell me. Do you even know the name of one of them? He asked curiously. You. Turning his head, the son of Batman saw the enemy responsible for all this. Rage and hatred emerged in his eyes, and before Talia could react, the boy sprung to his feet and dashed forward. Damien. Stop. Talia's eyes widened in horror as she stretched to stop him. Too bad, this kid clearly took after his father's talent. Despite being young, his explosive speed was quite remarkable. Escaping his mother's range, Damien stretched his arm and drew out a sword attached to one of the corpses without slowing down. The future boy wonder moved with dexterous steps, brandishing the blade in his hand and charging towards the enemy like any hot-blooded youth who had just lost everything would. I'll kill you. He roared and slashed his sword. The fine blade made from remarkable steel collided with the motionless enemy. Then shattered into a million pieces. Silence once again returned to the atmosphere, save for the sound of clattering metal. Seeing the weapon shatter before his eyes, the boy was shocked and hurriedly leaped backwards. He knew nothing of Amari, nor did he know his abilities. Slade hadn't revealed any meaningful information during their short conversation, and he unfortunately didn't watch TV like other kids his age. Seeing that the enemy had such astonishing defense, his fighting instincts kicked in as he proceeded to put distance between him and his adversary. Leaping backwards, he landed on rubble several feet away. And when he refocused his gaze, he was startled to find two fingers right in front of him. Sigh. Kids nowadays. Snap. A finger snap fell into his ears in a split second. The next. Bang. The son of Batman exploded into blood mist. Chapter 164. Is Amy Anderson live from News Network? Over the past few days, the internet has set off a storm due to the viral video of the President of the United States live execution. Alexander Joseph Lex Luthor, billionaire genius and CEO of Lex Corporations, was streamed live from the Oval Office at the White House, where he was seemingly erased out of existence by the alien otherworlder the world has come to know as the Deviant himself. Amari. Before this was the shocking revelation that the United States President was a member of the 7 infamous individuals who made up the villain organization known as the Light. Known members alongside him are Ocean Master and Queen Bee. The ruler of Byalia, who also had her secret identity revealed yesterday, makes it 3 whose executions have been made public. Analysts have gone through the execution footages word by word and have concluded based on the dialogues that at least 4 members of the Light have already been killed off, leaving 3 more potential members to face. Mount Justice. The lounge area was silent as the news played out for everyone to hear. Miss Martian stood in place, mixing a bowl full of cookie batter. Wally and Artemis sat on the edges of the table opposite each other. Aqualad rested against the sofa, Kara sat on that sofa. Each one listened to the news with different expressions and inner thoughts. This guy isn't slowing down, is he? Crunch. The depressing silence was broken by the sound of Wally chewing popcorn. Don't, Wally. Just don't. Artemis shot him a glare. How could someone be so insensitive? Humph. Well, forgive me for trying to liven up the dead atmosphere. The ginger-haired speedster snorted and returned to his bowl of popcorn. How can you even eat at a time like this? I don't know. Guess I'm not as uptight as some people. What did you just say, you grubbing? Stop it. Both of you, Aqualad said, stepping forward. Both sides glared at each other before turning away. It had been 3 days since their mission to the negative multiverse, and it was no exaggeration to say that the experience was their worst one yet. Their mission was to follow Superman to the negative Earth and help in any way they could. While Superman dealt with his alternate self, they would clean up any others who tried to get in the way. Honestly, this shouldn't have been a problem. After all, they had already faced the Injustice League. Parademons weren't a difficulty. Superman was the main force, the actual backup. They were just there to make up the numbers. Unfortunately, they encountered something they shouldn't have, and the complications that came with it was something they had no preparation for. Superboy was lost. Possessed by some ancient being and hadn't been seen ever since. Robin was injured and in a comatose state. The League hadn't commented on his condition since. The negative Earth was saved, but not by them. Ultimately, the mission wasn't a failure, but no one considered it a success either. With 2 members of the team absent, the mood was at an all-time low. It hadn't been this bad since the training simulation incident where everyone had to watch each other die while facing impossible odds deliberately set against them. But at least that was ultimately a simulation. This, on the other hand, had actually happened. What followed their return to their universe didn't help things either. Falling right into an immediate battle of two powerful beings and dying in the process. Kara was alright. It wasn't hard to process death as it wasn't her first time. The others were different. The simulation had been a fake death. This was real. Point being, the current mood was the result of successive blows aimed at all the wrong places. Calder sighed. "Look, I know things turned out bad," he said, sweeping his gaze across everyone. "But Connor and Robin wouldn't want to see us here wallowing around like this. Robin would want us to push on until he wakes up, and Connor would want us to find him. We need to trust each other and stay strong to do that. Only then can we get through our difficult times." "Yeah." Wally scoffed. "I think we all consciously skipped the finding part. For all we know, he could be in another dimension right now." Calder remained silent, unable to give an answer. "However, that's easy." Everyone's gaze turned to Artemis on the other end of the table. The blonde pursed her lips and spoke. "Now, there's only one person that could know where Connor is. If we want to find Superboy, why not just find him?" she said, her gaze fixed on the TV. Everyone followed her gaze, then brought it back. "Him?" Wally asked, stunned. "You're kidding, right?" Artemis raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm not." The amusement on his face faded. "Hold on. You're serious? What's wrong with that?" "That's a terrible plan," Wally exclaimed immediately. "You can't be. No way. There's no way we're doing that. The idea is feasible." Calder's words fell into his ears. The ginger-haired speedster froze. "I have considered this possibility for the past 3 days." "Calder." "What?" Wally turned to the Atlantean, bafflement written all over his face. He was the only one that was there. Aqualad answered solemnly. "If anyone has answers, it would be him." Then he looked at Wally's not very good expression and asked. "Is there anything wrong? Is there any? Is there any?" The boy rushed his hand through his hair. "Yes, there is something wrong. That's Amari, the alien maniac who just killed the President of the United States on live TV. It had barely been 3 days since their return from the negative Earth. Barely 3 days since their world was destroyed and reformed. However, the Earth hadn't been peaceful. Before, the world's focus was on the Earth's destruction and reconstruction. Amari may have reversed the Earth's state back to normal, but people's memories of the end of the world weren't erased. Everyone knew that the Earth had exploded, and they had all died once. The result could be imagined. Citizens in many countries began to protest. Riots spread and people began to panic. Fear spread like a plague. Governments all over the world had been clamoring for the Justice League to drop an official statement clearly explaining what had happened. For a time, it seemed like the world was about to end again. Until he reappeared. Just like before. Every phone, laptop, government radio, and TV station was taken over. All connected to display the single scene of Amari in the Arctic with the ruler of Byalia, Queen Bee herself. What happens when you drop a desert queen into an icy cold river flowing underneath solid ice? The whole world saw the end result of the experiment. Then it was Lex Luthor the following day, being shown disintegrating out of existence. Whatever chaos was previously brewing settled down quickly as people's minds shifted from one thing to another. Wally had watched the live video. In his impression, Amari was a psychopath who could cause someone to explode into pieces if he was in a bad mood. Such a person shouldn't be actively sought for but avoided at all costs. The memory of Lex Luthor being erased from existence made Kid Flash shudder on the spot. At that moment, Artemis teased with a small smirk. "Is that fear I hear, Wally? I still stand by my opinion. Looking for Amari is a one-way ticket to commit suicide." "Perhaps not. But if we want to find Superboy, it seems like it's our only choice." Wally looked depressed. Great plan and all. But. At that moment, Kara, who hadn't spoken since the conversation started, interrupted. "I think you guys are missing one little detail. How are we going to find him?" Silence flooded the lounge. Under Kara's gaze, Wally, Calder, Megan and Artemis turned to look at each other. Then. They all turned in the same direction, all four pairs falling on her. Why are you guys looking at me like that? Chapter 165. Mount Justice, Lounge. Kara stood in the center of the room, her arms crossed as she looked at each of her teammates. Their stares made her uncomfortable, though she wasn't sure why. Finally, she broke the silence. Okay, why is everyone looking at me like that? Megan glanced at Calder before stepping forward. It's just, you're probably the only one here who's ever been close to Amari. I mean, you two did have a relationship of some kind, right? Kara's brow furrowed. What? Wally scoffed from the couch, throwing up his hands. For the record, I hate this plan and where it's going, but if I have to say it, then yeah, Kara, you're probably the only person in the world who knows him the best. Kara blinked, her cheeks flushing slightly. The weight of Wally's words sank in, and for a moment, she was at a loss for how to respond. You did live with him, Wally added bluntly, his tone more resigned than accusatory. Before Kara could respond, Artemis stormed over and smacked Wally on the arm. Hey! What was that for? Wally yelped. You can't just say things like that to a girl. How insensitive are you? Artemis shot back. It's the truth. Wally protested, rubbing his arm. And if we're really doing this, then someone's gotta say it. Kara sighed, shaking her head as she turned to Calder. You can't be serious. Calder's expression was calm but resolute. We have no other choice. You're the only one we know who has had prolonged contact with him. It's not as easy as you make it sound, Kara replied hesitantly. Why not? Wally quipped. Just get your cell phone, dial his number, give him a call and... Artemis punched him again. Ow. Will you quit that? Wally uttered while rubbing his shoulder. It hurt. Hello, Wally. Stop talking, Artemis snapped, glaring at him. Calder ignored the commotion and turned back to Kara. Why not? He pressed gently. Because. Kara hesitated, rubbing the back of her neck. Because I don't have his number. The room fell silent for a beat before Wally broke it again. Well, then take us to his house. Or hideout. Or lair. Whatever. You should have a key, right? Artemis raised her fist, and Wally flinched preemptively. Hey, quit it. No, you don't understand, Kara interrupted, her tone more serious now. Amari doesn't live on Earth and from what I recall, nor in this universe either. Plus he didn't exactly leave me an access card. I don't know how to get back there. I've technically only been there once and that was when his base was still outside Gotham. It's not there anymore. Megan frowned. So, unless one of us can travel between dimensions, we're stuck. Kara nodded. Exactly. Calder frowned. Then we need to find another way. Any ideas? The room fell silent again. No one responded. Kara, is there no other way we could reach him? Calder asked, his voice measured. No. Kara hesitated. Well. She glanced away, her expression uncertain. The last time I saw him, I went to where his base was previously located and in Gotham. I did meet him, but it had nothing to do with that spot. I'm not sure if it'll still work. Gotham. Artemis's eyes lit up right then. I got it. Huh. Everyone turned to her, stunned. It's a long shot, but I think there might be one other place we can try, Artemis said, drawing their full attention. Please, go on. Calder prompted. Tell me, have you guys ever heard of Strader Pharmaceuticals? The group exchanged glances, puzzled, before Calder spoke. It appears not. Right. It's a pharmaceutical company down in Gotham City. I came across it a few weeks ago when I was trying to stop a guy named Deathstroke from stealing a steroid drug alongside Robin. Wally raised an eyebrow. Rob was there with you? Yes, and Batman. Anyway, just when we were about to face off, a computer AI showed up in the form of a red hologram, telling us to let them go. The group exchanged puzzled expressions, everyone except Kara. Red hologram? Kara's eyes widened. Alice? Artemis raised an eyebrow. You know it? Meanwhile. Mission room, Mount Justice. The scene in the lounge was displayed on a holographic screen. In the mission room watching was Martian Manhunter, Red Tornado, and Superman. Martian Manhunter stood silently, observing the display with his usual calm. Red Tornado stood nearby, his expressionless face somehow conveying quiet concern. Superman stood firm, arms crossed, his gaze focused but troubled. They seem fine, Martian Manhunter commented after a moment of silence. Superman's lips tightened, his voice subdued. Fine is a relative term, John. None of us are fine after what's happened, not really. But they're young, they'll adapt better than most of us. Red Tornado's robotic voice cut through the air. Their mental health is a concern. Prolonged exposure to trauma has lasting effects on young minds. They have already lost 2 teammates. We must ensure they have the support they require. Robin will be fine. Clark uttered, his head lowering. And we'll find Superboy. I'll make sure of it. Superboy's possession and disappearance had given the Man of Steel a wake-up call. His behavior towards his clone was wrong, very wrong. It didn't matter how uncomfortable he felt back then, the boy must have felt an equal level of discomfort. But while Connor had tried to bridge that gap, he ran away from it. He had failed. Failed to be there for someone important when he was needed. Not once, but twice. Clark had already made up his mind. He would find Superboy and drive whatever had taken over his body out of him. No matter what it took. Martian Manhunter nodded in agreement before adding. Perhaps it would be best if we let them carry out their plan. Superman looked over. You mean we should let them look for Amari on their own? Indeed. He uttered. Superboy is their teammate, a member of their family. Standing in their way, while it might be good for their personal safety, might end up counterproductive. You must acknowledge this, Superman, that their current circumstances leave little room for prolonged reflection. The destruction of the world, and its subsequent restoration, has created a level of existential dread even the League struggles to handle. We will not have the spare time to handle this problem. The mention of the Earth's destruction shifted the conversation. Martian Manhunter turned towards Superman. On that note, Kal-El, I am surprised to find you here. With the global panic still widespread, would have assumed your presence was needed elsewhere. Superman sighed, his expression heavy. Batman asked me to be here. He called a League meeting. Before anyone could respond, the Zeta tubes in the corner of the room activated. Zeta tube announcement, recognized, Captain Marvel, 15. A burst of yellow light filled the room as the Zeta tube portal receded. When the light faded, Captain Marvel stood there, his characteristic grin plastered across his face. He flew forward with ease, landing before the trio. Hey, guys. I'm back, he greeted cheerfully, his tone light but tinged with nervous energy. Captain Marvel, Martian Manhunter greeted with a nod, a quick surprise flashing by before his regular tone returned. Neutral yet welcoming. Superman straightened, his eyebrows lifting in surprise. Billy. Even Red Tornado turned his head slightly toward the young hero. The surprise in the room was palpable. Captain Marvel scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Yeah, I'm as surprised as you guys are. But hey, I'm here, and I'm good now. All healed up and ready to go. Superman's eyes narrowed slightly. Your powers, they've returned. Billy's grin faltered for a split second before he nodded quickly. Why yeah. They came back, over time. I think Amari just. I don't know, took them temporarily. Or maybe the gods gave them back. Who knows how these things work, right? Martian Manhunter studied him for a moment, his piercing gaze making Billy shift uncomfortably. Finally, the Martian spoke. I see. It is good to have you back. Yeah. Billy exhaled in relief and quickly changed the subject. Anyway, Batman called me here for a meeting. That's why you're all here too, right? Superman nodded, his expression softening. That's right. We need to brief all available League members on the current situation. Unfortunately, Wonder Woman is still recovering, so she won't be joining us. You found Wonder Woman? Realization struck Superman. Captain Marvel hadn't been involved in League affairs for a while. The last time was during the League's initial attack on Amari. Back then, several Leaguers had disappeared. Yes. It is a long story, Captain. Red Tornado replied. One in which you will be briefed on after we deal with our current situation. Billy's expression grew serious. Current situation? Is this about Amari? Superman exchanged a glance with Martian Manhunter before answering. In part. It's about the destruction and reconstruction of the Earth. Billy blinked, confused. Destruction? Reconstruction? What does this have to do with Amari? He was a partial cause of the phenomenon the whole Earth experienced. His battle with an entity named Lucifer caused the Earth and everything around it to be completely destroyed. Amari restored the planet afterward. Superman concluded. Red Tornado picked up. Little is known about the full details. Which is why we are here. Batman is bringing people who can shed more light on the situation. Captain Marvel nodded. Then asked. Why are we meeting here anyway? Why not in the Watchtower? It was League protocol for all meetings to be held within the Watchtower. Captain Marvel assumed this would be no different. However, the atmosphere instantly fell into silence once again. Is something wrong? The Watchtower is no more. Wait. What? Captain Marvel was surprised. Indeed. Red Tornado explained. The battle destroyed the Earth and everything around it. The Earth itself was luckily restored. The Watchtower, however, wasn't. Green Arrow was on duty when it happened. Clark spoke up in a low voice. He's gone. Billy Batson froze. Martian Manhunter sighed. Clark looked gloomy. His clenched fists clearly displaying his inner emotions. The past few months had been the worst they had ever experienced since the Justice League's inception. Hawkman, Captain Atom, Green Lantern John Stewart, Flash, Wonder Woman and Cyborg were lost. The last two had been discovered. The status of the rest was unknown. Several Leaguers were lost, Zatara lost his magic and could only permanently take on the role of Dr. Fate. The Earth had experienced numerous crises. Superman was nearly kidnapped once and nearly died twice. Batman almost fell into a permanent coma. Black Canary and Batgirl were paralyzed. Robin was injured, Superboy was possessed. The Watchtower was lost, Green Arrow was dead and Black Canary was in mourning as a result. The entire world had experienced a collective death. The only good thing that came out of the last one was that the breaches were permanently closed with the Earth's reconstruction. The room fell silent. Billy's usual cheer was gone, replaced by a look of shock and grief. He swallowed hard, glancing at the others. I didn't know. Superman placed a hand on Billy's shoulder, offering a faint smile. It's okay, Billy. We're glad you're back. I'm sure that Oliver would be too. Everyone would. Clark understood why Batman would recall Shazam. With so many members missing, they would need all the help they could get. Billy nodded solemnly. Thanks. I'm ready to. Zeta Tube announcement, recognized, Batman, 02. Zeta Tube announcement, recognized, Dr. Fate, 17. This was followed by a bright yellow light illuminating the teleportation pad tunnel. The Zeta Tube's glow faded as Batman and Dr. Fate stepped forward. Batman's signature grim expression immediately drew the room's attention. Batman. Dr. Fate. You're finally here. Batman nodded curtly, wasting no time. We have a problem. Everyone in the room had their brows furrow. What's the issue? Superman had his frown run the deepest. Is it Amari? No, Batman replied, his tone clipped. His piercing gaze swept across the room. It's about our supposed allies from the negative multiverse. Superman's frown deepened. You mean Constantine? And the Phantom Stranger. Batman's finished and his voice dropped an octave. They're gone. Coastline, near the island shore. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and crimson. The waves lapped gently against the rocky shore as John Constantine stood on an elevated hill, his trench coat billowing lightly in the ocean breeze. A lit cigarette dangled from his lips, the smoke curling upwards like ghosts of his past mistakes. He exhaled deeply, a cynical grin forming. Bloody poetic, ain't it? Sunsets like these, they make you almost forget the chaos waitin' to pounce. Taking another drag from his cigarette, he muttered to himself, almost. Behind him, the air shimmered unnaturally before coalescing into a figure cloaked in shadowy robes. The Phantom Stranger emerged silently, his presence an eerie contradiction of calm and foreboding. Constantine didn't bother turning around. Knew you'd show up sooner or later, mate. You've got a knack for these dramatic entrances. The Phantom Stranger said nothing. Both figures just stood there, peering into the distance. Until. It is time, John. Time to honor your part of the commitment. Worry not, mate. A deal's a deal. Don't get your knickers in a twist. Constantine says, his eyes turning serious. But this plan of yours better work. Because I'd rather not die for nothing. What he received as reassurance was the phantom stranger's emotionless reply. Nothing is absolute. All I can say is it has a higher chance than anything anyone else has done. Just a higher chance, eh? The Englishman chuckles and looks towards the horizon. If we fail, we'll be done for. I've gone through the League archives in this universe. And that guy is a vengeful fucker. The burden of consequence falls on all who tread the path. The burden of consequence, huh? How bloody uncomforting. There was no reply. John didn't care, spending several more seconds admiring what would most likely be his last sunset. Bloody multiverses, he muttered under his breath. Never did like M. Always a mess. The man let out a breath of smoke and dropped the stub that was left of his cigarette. All right. Time to get to work. With the slight shift of as he caught sight of a figure in the distance. A man sat on a jagged rock near the shoreline, his head bowed as if in deep thought. The red of his suit stood out starkly against the darkening sky, the lightning bolt emblem on his chest unmistakable. The Flash. The same one that had been missing for many months now. But first, let's head on over and let him know his part in this mess. Chapter 166. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the beach in a deep orange glow. The waves lapped at a man's feet as he stared out into the endless expanse of water. The man sat on a rock near the shoreline. A scruffy, unkempt beard was plastered on his chin. His body was thin, the outlines of his bones visible from his skin-tight suit. Eyes dull, devoid of the light and life they once contained several months ago. The time before he and his fellow Leaguers under mental manipulation had tried to force their way into Amari's base. Before he was transported to a negative reality where he lived in what he could only describe as a nightmare. His name was Barry Allen. AKA, The Flash. And he was the fastest man alive. Back so soon, mate? The sound of footsteps across the sand fell into his ears, followed by a voice that carried a heavy British accent. Eventually, a man in a yellow trench coat with blonde hair and blue eyes made his way beside him. Yeah. The Flash took a look and responded before turning his gaze away. John Constantine. An occult magician from the negative Earth. Or at least, that's what he told him. John raised an eyebrow. That was odd. He shouldn't be like this. Hey, you alright? In response. Fine, I guess. The Flash said without even turning his head, his gaze fixed on the dimming sky. Fine. The occult warlock raised an eyebrow, then sighed. Nah mate, you don't look fine. What makes you think that? Barry asked apathetically. Your eyes. John responded. I've seen the look in them before. They're the eyes of a man who's been through hell. The Englishman said, his gaze shifting. Eyes like mine. The Flash was silent. Until. That world. Yours. He uttered in a bland tone, it was hell. The memories were still fresh. As if it were just yesterday. Waking up after falling into the void with the rest of the League. He had found himself in an apocalyptic version of Metropolis. There, he met Clark, not knowing it wasn't the Clark Kent he was familiar with. Not long after waking up, he was knocked out again. What followed was basically torture. Strapped up to a perpetual motion machine, forced to run constantly, day and night, acting as a battery to power his base. Like a hamster in a hamster wheel. Flash remembered every bit of it. Without exaggeration, he could say that those were the worst few months of his life. I know. John sighed. The negative world isn't for everyone. It made our world's Justice League doubt everything we had ever believed in. However, do correct me if I'm wrong, but I doubt that's what broke you like this. John did not imagine the tensing of his fists. I knew a Barry Allen in my world. I fought alongside him many times. Quite the character you could imagine. Resilient, strong, always managed to find his way, no matter what happened. He went on, listing several qualities of his world's version of the Flash. I see him in you. Every last bit of it. Which is why I know that your time on my Earth isn't enough to make you what you are now. There's more, isn't it? Those tightened fists clenched to the extreme. Before loosening. Constantine frowned slightly. Tell me, what did you find? The Flash remained silent. A seemingly heavy pressure resting on his shoulders. Until. Joe and Iris are dead. His voice broke the long silence. This time, carrying a tad more emotion than before. Oliver too. Oh. John fell silent. That time, when you brought me here, and let me go. You knew, didn't you? Barry could still remember John's words a few hours ago. A lot of things happened since you were gone. I can't explain it all. It'll be better if you go see for yourself. That was hours ago. Just green arrows. I had no idea about the others. Constantine replied after a few seconds. He knew of Green Arrow's death. It had been mentioned while he was with the League. During the end of the Earth. Green Arrow was in the watchtower when it happened. Unlike the Earth, however, Amari didn't fix it. Iris and Joe West. That was new. How? Dr. Light escaped from Iron Heights last night. Tried to flush me out by using them as bait. I never showed up, and they died for it. I saw their bodies when I left for Central City. The already gloomy atmosphere grew even more depressing. How convenient. Though why am I not surprised? John thought. I see. Well then, I think you know what you need to do, mate. He said with his hands in his pants pockets. Clear the board. Start again. The Flash's return to Earth 16 was the Phantom Stranger's work. Constantine was just there to take care of the rest. It had barely been a day since then. To Constantine's confusion, he had allowed the Flash to leave unhindered. Now he knew why. Barry Allen had run all the way back to Central City upon regaining his freedom. To see Iris, and Joe, and everyone else. But no one was home. He checked the Central City picture news. Iris wasn't there. Then he ran to CCPD and learned of their deaths. Leading to the scene currently ongoing now. Another flashpoint. Barry didn't need Constantine to point it out. The moment he learned the news, he had already thought of traveling back in time to stop it from happening. But I promised Iris, before she. He paused, then. I can't. Yes, you can, Barry. You have to. The words fell into his ears, causing him to frown. No, I can't. Not anymore. I can't mess with the timeline for my personal selfishness. I've already done it once. Do it again, and everything will change. Yeah, figured you'd say that. John said, his eyes narrowing slightly. Sigh. The middle-aged magician took in a deep breath. Look, I know you're in a world of hurt right now, and what I'm about to say is gonna make me sound like an insensitive prick. But there are things that need to be done, Barry, and I didn't bring you back to your Earth just to watch you mourn. He said, his tone serious. I found you because I need your help. Yeah. What for? I want you to help me get rid of Amari. The air froze. Flash stiffened slightly at the words that came out of Constantine's mouth. You're kidding, right? Frankly, I wish I was. In response, the man replied apathetically. However, I mean every word of it, and you're the only man who fits the job description. He wasn't kidding. Flash fell silent. The revelation of Constantine's true intentions, weighing down on him. During this time, neither released a word. Ultimately. You want me to go back in time? Yes. Because if you don't, Amari will be the death of us all. In your world and beyond. How? What do you mean by this? The frown on Barry's face became increasingly prevalent. Constantine looked at him deeply. Then turned to look at the sea. Amari's presence has affected your world in ways it was never supposed to. You've experienced more crises in the past few months than you have in years. The breaches, the deaths. It's affected everyone here. Not just the people, your league as well. I checked through your league files. Several months ago. It's already happened before. You, Wonder Woman, Captain Atom, Lantern, Hawk, Cyborg. The whole group that went with you that day disappeared. Zatara lost his magic permanently and had to become the host for Dr. Fate to have any significance. Captain Marvel was stripped off his powers. The League is in shambles, Barry. Flash listened to the recap and was shocked. Losing Iris, Joe, and hearing of Green Arrow's death had a huge impact on him, so much so that he didn't even stop to see the rest of the League. Of course, he figured Batman should already know he was here by now. It was his thing, Barry was sure of that. And Amari is the cause. Is that not enough? That was the League's fault. Barry replied with a slight stutter. It was the last thing he remembered before leaving this earth. How he and the League decided to break into that place and were sucked into shattered space. Honestly, he still didn't know what had come over them to act like that. Was it Oliver's? A real gut punch to where it hurt. The only ones the League managed to find are Wonder Woman and Cyborg. The former was in my world, just like you. The other. Taking his gaze away from the sea, he set his eyes on Barry. It's complicated to explain really. How about I just show you? He said, raising his hands and placing it on Flash's head. Hey, what are you? His body froze mid-sentence. The next moment, Barry's mind was infiltrated with numerous visions that didn't belong to him. The income universe. Far in its outreaches. On a planet named Apocalypse. The scene of Cyborg being extracted from the Apocalypse computer frame into a new body while the old one remained flashed in his eyes. It quickly changed to the secret lab in Darkseid's tower. Rows and rows of monsters that looked strangely similar to parademons. The burning fires of Apocalypse. The readying armies. In the last vision, he saw something getting launched by Darkseid into a boom tube before disappearing. Then it all collapsed. Ugh. Barry felt like his mind had been shoved through a cheese grater the moment it ended. He nearly keeled over, hands on the sand while releasing heavy pants. That. What was that? Flash asked, horrified. That's what happened to Cyborg. He was found by Darkseid, dismantled and integrated into Apocalypse's computer. What's in the hands of your Justice League is a clone, one that will display to Darkseid everything he needs to know about you. Flash's face paled. The rest? Those creatures I saw in the Paradooms. Creatures born by fusing parademons with Doomsday DNA. Constantine replied. Your world hasn't even met Doomsday yet. The ultimate biological weapon capable of killing Superman in my world. It did. We managed to revive him, but I have to warn the others. Flash interrupted urgently. John felt the urge to deadpan. I'm afraid you're missing the point, Barry. Darkseid's already sent Doomsday here. It's on its way, nothing the League can do will change that. Not the League before and definitely not the one now. And let's say by some luck, you manage to kill it, what then? Darkseid has a whole army of Paradooms ready to march on Earth in its most vulnerable state. No matter whether you win or lose after that, the cost will be great. The man's tone hardened. And even if you get past all that, it's still just the beginning. Darkseid may not be Amari's doing, but everything else is. He's a being that wasn't supposed to exist in this timeline, but did due to a series of events even I can't explain. Hence, due to his special nature, his presence on Earth alone will attract a lot of unwanted trouble. With everything that's already about to happen, how much more can the League have on their plate? How much more can your world take before collapsing? The man froze. His expression at a loss. There we are. John knew he was swaying. All he needed was a little push. I know this is hard, Barry, but the fact is you have tough times ahead of you. Many will die, more than you have already lost. But you can change all that, right here, right now. I'm not asking you to go back in time to save Iris. I'm asking you to go back in time to save your world from experiencing all these tragic fates in the first place. Sure, it will be different, and it will have its ups and downs. But trust me when I tell you that it will be better than what's coming your way. The man put his hands in his pockets. So choose. Between your sense of justice, or the world. Between what is, and what can be. There is no right or wrong on this one, mate, only the lesser of two evils. Flash was silent, an emotional war going on within him that no one else had access to. Silence engulfed the shoreline, with the only exception being the sound of the waves. Time elapsed. Until. You said Amari was never supposed to be here. Bloody right. Then what would you have me do? The Scarlet Speedster asked. Travel back in time and kill Amari before he's born. His voice was particularly heavy, especially when mentioning the K word. At this moment, Barry was perplexed, not knowing what exactly he was doing. He knew how dangerous what John was insinuating was. He was creating another flashpoint. Everything would change once he did it. In ways he couldn't possibly control. Worst off, he might not even remember it this time. However, the faces flashed in his mind. Joe, Iris, Oliver, Captain Adam, Stewart. All of them. Barry realized that he didn't have much left. And with what was coming ahead, losing any more would break him. So. Was this it? The first time he would stain his hands? He wondered. However. Nah, mate. Constantine's reply was not what he expected. It doesn't work like that. Huh. You can't kill him, not the way you think anyway. John said, scratching his head. Trying to solve the problem that way might work for anyone else but him. Why? Because like I said, Amari isn't from around here. John said with a slight frown. He wasn't born into our multiverse but came on his own. Amari's powers accompanied him from the moment he dropped into this world. So unlike everyone else, he doesn't have a weak period. His strength wasn't as high as it was now, but his survivability wasn't one bit lower when he arrived on Earth. No offense, but not even Soups had the power to kill him at that time. If push came to shove, he would lose, badly. Flash frowned, feeling slightly annoyed. Then what's the point of telling me all this? Because the plan was never for you to kill him. Constantine revealed. But you do need to kill someone else. Chapter 167. The sun slowly released its last rays. On the shoreline. Barry's mind raced, the weight of the words pressing down on him like a physical force. He needed to kill someone. Not Amari but kill nonetheless. It wasn't him, it wasn't his nature. He wanted to refuse, but it immediately popped up. He thought of Ollie, of Victor, of Diana. He thought of the countless lives that had already been lost, and the millions more that would be if Darkseid succeeded. If the Earth even survived that, the loss would, without a doubt, be too great. They had faced Darkseid before. He would definitely need to travel back in time. Use Flashpoint to prevent such the massive tragedy that would follow. The Justice League wasn't capable of dealing with this threat. Not before, not now. From what John showed him, it wouldn't matter either way. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Amari isn't evil. But he's not right, either. He's a force of nature. And maybe this is the only way. When he opened his eyes, they were filled with determination. Fine. I'll do it. I'll reset the timeline. But you'd better be right about this. If this doesn't work, if more people get hurt because of this, their blood is on your hands. Constantine gave a grim smile. Trust me, mate. My hands were bloody long before you showed up. And more people won't have to die. Just the one. He didn't get much response from Flash, though. Alright then, let's get you your metaphysical boon then. Constantine said, feeling the atmosphere. Then, he moved his hands together in weird ways, creating a complex glowing pattern with numerous symbols no larger than the size of his palm. Just leave that to John. Nothing much really. Just a simple little guidance spell. He thought while carrying the magic symbol and placing it on Barry's chest. Following which, he placed his arms back in his pockets. You'll run off to when and where you need to be. Built-in GPS, can't miss it. Right. Barry uttered, feeling odd all over. John's brows narrowed. Sighing, he turned and waved his hand. All right then, off you go. Haven't got all day. The Flash closed his eyes, then walked to the lined shoreline. He squatted, in the classic running posture of an Olympic runner. There we go. Where you need to be. To save us all. Under John's gaze, flashes of lightning crackled in on his body. Then. Zoom. A shockwave blasted outward, whipping Constantine's coat as the wind howled. A red streak of lightning carved across the water, splitting the horizon. Constantine exhaled, hands in his pockets. He muttered under his breath, watching the portal swallow Barry whole. Let's hope you're fast enough this time, mate. Then, a white explosion of light swallowed the whole world. The instant Barry crossed the threshold, everything blurred. The ocean, the sky, even the ground beneath him, all melted into streaks of color, sucked into an endless tunnel of light. The speed force roared around him, a storm of impossible motion. Time fractured and twisted, he could feel it pulling at him, whispering in a voice both familiar and alien. Faster. Slower. Stop. Go. Too soon. Too late. Just right. Barry clenched his jaw. He knew this feeling. The raw, terrifying power of time bending to his will, the endless possibility of every moment he had ever lived, or would live, collapsing into a single point. Constantine's spell burned on his chest, guiding him like an unseen hand. He wasn't just running through time, he was being pulled. Forced toward a moment the universe itself had decided he needed to reach. He narrowed his eyes. Where am I going? The answer came as flashes, glimpses of reality bleeding into the speed force. A ruined city, smoke rising from collapsed skyscrapers. The sky was dark, stained red by an unnatural eclipse. The ground was littered with bodies, civilians, heroes, gods. Dark side symbol, burned into the earth like a scar. Barry's heart pounded. No. No, no, no. The next image hit him even harder. Batman, beaten and broken, held up by parademons as their master stepped forward. Superman, on his knees, red eyes dimmed, a kryptonite blade buried in his chest. And at the center of it all, Amari. Standing untouched. Unfazed. Watching. Barry felt a cold dread crawl up his spine. He knew that stance. That expression. A calm, methodical patience, like someone looking at a chessboard, calculating the next move. The next moment, the gaze shifted. All Barry felt was a piercing lock on him as he peered through time, frightening the scarlet speedster to the point he almost fell into the wrong time point. What the hell happened there? The vision shattered. Barry gasped as the speed force twisted violently. The tunnel of light around him fractured, splitting into countless roads, countless possibilities. Each one led to a different time, a different future. One stood out. A glowing red path, wreathed in lightning. The spell on his chest burned hotter, yanking him forward. Barry gritted his teeth. All right, John. You'd better have been right about this. With a final push, he surged forward, into the red, into the unknown. And then. Boom. The world snapped back into focus. The moment Barry Allen emerged from the speed force, he knew he was in hell. The sky above him was a roiling mass of fire and shadow, casting an ominous red glow over the world of apologies. The air was thick with the stench of burning metal and something worse, something ancient and rotting. Towers of obsidian and steel stretched into the sky, their jagged spires pulsing with dark energy. The ground beneath his feet was cracked and lifeless, the remnants of a world that had never known peace. If he didn't know where John was sending him to, then he would no doubt mistake this place for hell. In the infinite multiverse, there was only one place that could pull off that look. Apocalypse. Looking at the new world he had found himself in, Barry took a deep breath. His body disappeared, forming a lightning streak that raced through the planet. The guiding spell burned against his skin like an unseen tether, pulling him forward. He didn't question it. He ran. Lightning crackled in his wake as he zigzagged through the nightmarish landscape, his feet barely touching the ground. Shadows shifted around him, monstrous shapes, glowing eyes, snarling teeth. Parademons. Dozens of them. The sentries, guards, the patrols, none of them got close. As the fastest man alive, he could guarantee this much. Wherever he passed, his presence would be long gone before they could process it. His only goal was to follow the feeling guiding him like a star in the dark night. Then do what needed to be done when he got there. Or so he thought, however. The Scarlet Speedster failed to notice that wherever he passed, the living organisms there, be it parademons or lower new gods, suddenly fell to the ground. It was instantaneously. No pain, no roar, no time to understand. They all fell, without exception. The Flash ran, not knowing that he had left a trail of death in his wake. The spell Constantine had infected him with drew him closer, clearly more than the occultist had made it out to be. Less than 10 seconds later, he arrived before a building. The pull he felt had stopped. This was his final destination. His feet skidded to a halt inside what looked like a war chamber, the air thick with power, crackling with something alive. The walls bore ancient markings, inscriptions of a time before the new gods. And at the center of it all, a crib. Barry's breath caught in his throat as he took a hesitant step forward. The baby inside was large, too large for a newborn. His skin was a pale gray, his features chiseled in an unnatural way, as if he were sculpted rather than born. Red, burning eyes flickered open for just a moment, gazing at the world with a quiet, terrible understanding before slipping shut again. This child before him would soon become a cosmic menace. A force so powerful that he would enslave worlds and universes. The very personification of the word evil and tyranny. Dark side. Barry inhaled sharply. The conversation with Constantine echoed in his mind. Your target mate is Darkseid. Darkseid? Yeah, the world-destroying, reality-enslaving, cosmic menace above the multiverse itself. That Darkseid. Darkseid is a constant, Barry. A pillar of the universe. His existence alone has a huge impact on the reality we live in today. So much so that removing him would make waves. Large enough ones. Destroy the pillars of a house. Everything will come crashing down. Exactly. What follows next is reconstruction. With Darkseid gone, the timeline will reset. Everything will change. And the multiverse will correct itself. That's the key, mate. Time. I don't understand. How will this affect Amari? Well, think of it like a computer crash. When it crashes, a reboot is in order. Everything in it will be rearranged according to protocol. Procedure. The universe is just like that. It has its own consciousness. Faint but alive. So tell me, Barry, what do you think will happen when it discovers something it can't reset? It'll get rid of it. Exactly what you're thinking. Like an antivirus software detecting an invasion. It will mobilize itself to eliminate all foreign entities. A bug in the code, an imperfection. When that happens, it will be one man against the multiverse. Amari's existence wasn't part of creation. The timeline would change to accommodate Darkseid's death. Then discover Amari's existence influencing the timeline, which was not part of the rewritten script. As an external being, the timeline would be unable to adjust him in any way. In that case, a semi-sentient consciousness would simply follow protocol. Eradication by force. And you're betting it will win. I am, mate. I am. And it all starts with killing Darkseid. Barry exhaled shakily, snapping out of his thoughts, his eyes falling back to the child before him. His fingers sparked with speed force energy, vibrating at impossible speeds. He hadn't done this before. But he knew what to do. A quick strike to the skull. No pain. No suffering. Just one moment, and it's over. John had told him. During the first year, a new god's physiology was at its weakest. The vulnerable phase. And here he was, 250,000 years back in the past to do the unthinkable. End this terror to be once and for all. His hand hovered above the baby's fragile form. And then. He hesitated. The child stirred, his tiny hand flexing slightly. His breathing was soft. Steady. A baby. That was all he was right now. Just a baby. Not Darkseid. Not the god of tyranny. Not the being who would one day burn galaxies with his presence alone. Just a child. Barry's body locked up, every nerve screaming at him to finish the job. He had to do this. He had to. And yet. He couldn't. His hand dropped to his side, and with a single step backward, he vanished. Barry ran. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. He didn't think. He just ran. The silence in the chamber remained undisturbed for several moments. Then, slowly, the child's tiny breaths grew shallow. Blood pooled at the edges of his lips, leaking from his nose, his eyes. A quiet whimper escaped his throat before he stilled. Whatever John Constantine had done to him, it wasn't just a guiding spell. It was black magic. Made possible by Constantine severing his own soul. An instant death spell. Capable of killing everything still within human limits. On the original Darkseid, this spell would be useless. Not now, though. On the young god of tyranny, its potency was extreme. Constantine knew the Flash. He knew Barry from his world. Hence, he knew that he would never be up for it. Never be able to bring himself to that level. To harm a defenseless child, no matter what he would grow up to be. So he made the necessary adjustments. John had made Barry a living, walking plague. The Flash would never need to go through with it. Just being there was enough. And so it did. The change had already begun. The multiverse shifted, the very fabric of reality twisting in response to Darkseid's death. Time bent, breaking apart and reassembling itself in a desperate attempt to fill the void left behind. The correction had begun. And as Barry Allen ran, streaking through the speed force toward his own timeline, he felt something change around him. A coldness, an emptiness where there was once resistance. What's happening? He thought, raising his hand to eye length. It was disintegrating, fading out of existence. No. I didn't do anything. No. No. Then. Nothing. Barry Allen running in the Speed Force suddenly disappeared. A white light exploding from his position in the Speed Force, spreading to all the multiverse. Back on the beach, watching the white light illuminate everything, John Constantine fell into deep thought about the conversation he had with the Flash. And you're betting it will win? I am, mate. I am. And it all starts with killing Darkseid. And if it can't? If it can't? The man chuckled with self-depreciation. He had asked the Phantom Stranger the same thing. And now, he would give Barry Allen the same answer he gave him. Then it will seal him away. That's how it works. What you can't destroy, you imprison in a place where no one can reach. The multiverse will do the same. Hopefully, forever. Plan A was destruction. Plan B was imprisonment. Or so he thought. Unknown to John, however, Plan B was the actual plan. The Phantom Stranger didn't believe that Amari could be destroyed. Lucifer was testament to it. Instead, he was betting that the universe would be able to seal him away. In a separate dimension, with the laws of time and space reinforced with so much power that even Amari, who had absorbed all the energy in the God sphere, wouldn't be able to break free. That was the Phantom Stranger's plan. To trap him for all eternity. So in reality, there was no plan A. The same way he withheld the truth from Barry, Phantom had withheld the truth from him. Of course, even if he knew, he didn't care. There was nothing waiting for him after this. The semi-consciousness of the multiverse didn't take kindly to those who removed one of its central pillars before it could even serve its purpose. As the direct cause, John would be sentenced to punishment. He knew this. Thankfully, the Phantom Stranger hadn't skipped on the consequences part. Even if the universe reset, there would be no John Constantine anymore. No matter what reality, he would be erased from existence. Cheers, lad. He thought as the light approached. I hope I see you again one day. Then closed his eyes in waiting. The light washed over, and the multiverse reset. The end.